let's see, we're not expecting Jerry, right?
We are not.
So Commissioner Rogers is the only one we're waiting for?
Yes. But if you would like to get started as we keep an eye out for him, I do not see him yet. But we have received the go-ahead from IT, so if you're willing, we can get started.
Terrific. Great. Well, welcome everyone to the March 16th, 2020 Washington County Board of Commissioners work session. This is Chair Catherine Harrington, and with me are commissioners. I'm advancing everybody to chair status today. Commissioners Pam Treese and Nafisa Fai. Commissioner Jerry Willey is excused, and we're hoping that Commissioner Roy Rogers will be joining us soon. So
there he is.
First item on the agenda is board communications. Oh, there's Commissioner Rogers. Board communications, who would like to go first?
I can go. It's been a busy week, but I'm not sure I have a lot to report. You know, it's kind of crazy. We were all busy all day yesterday. So I did attend a Central Cultural board meeting last week. It was a recap of the Central Gala, which was very successful and well done for a Zoom type of event. I do want to ask the question here. I intend to read a statement about International Transgender Day of Visibility tonight at the board meeting, and I just wanted to make sure we were all on the same page that it's okay to do that. I didn't.
So I, with Elizabeth's help, have coordinated a statement and letting all of you know about recognizing International Transgender Day, and that's where Megan got in touch with you. And so my suggestion is that since we have two proclamations on the agenda, is that this be the third item under proclamations. I'll make a statement and then you'll make a statement. I believe you and I are the only commissioners who have chosen to make a statement.
Okay, I just wanted some clarity about how that was going to flow. So good, thank you. I appreciate that. And one other note, just for the record, I know that we're going to be approving the WCBA contract tonight, and I wanted to note that WCA is a dues-paying member of Westside Economic Alliance. So just wanted to have that on the record. That's it.
Great, thank you, Commissioner Treese. Commissioners Fai, Rogers, any communication items?
I can go next. Thank you, Chair. March 8th was last Monday was International Women's Day, and I had the opportunity to be a guest speaker at ERCO's International Women's Day event, and it was very well attended, and I was honored to have their invitation. Also, part of International Women's Day last week, I participated in Arrow's pro-choice event along with the film director of Personhood, Policing Pregnant Women in America, Joanne, and also NARAL's executive director, Christelle Allen, and we discussed the future of the reproductive freedom movement. And I would ask everyone if they get a chance to see that film, Personhood. I think everybody will notice the impacts of elected official words and how they can actually be detrimental to the very people that they're supposed to help and protect. I also dialed in to listen AOC's legislative committee, and I heard your comments about the bill we're supporting, Chair. I also had a great meeting with Washington County Thrive's collaborative leadership team, and really got to know some of the initiatives and the great work they're doing around homelessness and addressing that. And I really think that this is a side conversation I have to have with Tanya to really utilize that committee or that group to sort of embed in our own how we communicate our internal services to the board and how we do presentations here, and utilize the wealth of knowledge and wisdom that exists within our community here. And so it was really busy. I also had to sit downs with a couple of my constituents, and a lot of one of the two issues that are really pressing for them was code enforcement, and then also another constituent and my a few of them are pushing to have for our board to consider preventative ordinance around future preventative ordinance around the sale of puppies and kittens in Washington County, and realizing the dilemma is that unincorporated areas of Washington County, we don't have business license, and we could potentially be exploited and have these kittens and puppies being. So people are looking into engaging us to have a discussion about that preventative ordinance and what that would look like. So other than that, I think that's all I have.
The only two things
I turn it to you, Chair.
Oh, I'm sorry.
Oh, go ahead, Commissioner Rogers.
As everybody knows, everyone's busy this time of year and a lot of meetings. I appreciate hearing what you're all doing. I had a swamp day yesterday, but I squoze in the WCCC meeting. 2 points of interest. One, the TDT increase. We did. There were some questions from both Hillsborough and Beaverton on what formula we can use, but that's pretty prescribed inside the ordinance. But it's for all of you who may not know, that gets up over $9,000 per dwelling unit, and that's making affordable housing a little more difficult, but that's the cost of us doing business. The other thing, and I have said this in the regional table as well, the emergency routes are really important to all of us, but the cost is enormous. And so what always happens in all, transportation projects, it's the queuing. So you may be on the high list, but you may not be queued until some future date. And so everyone should just keep a good look at that. It's important in terms of how things get queued and what the costs are, and what gets competitive with other things. A lot of people don't know how many bridges we have in the county. We've got a lot of bridges. They're not big ones like you have the Burnside, but they're over culverts or over little streams, and yet other facilities take, I think, a little more notoriety just because of their size and regional interest. But I won't dwell. You all should be mindful that as that comes in, you could see queuing that would occur way out in the future. The other thing I would say is that the regional JPAC transportation position paper, that is really, really difficult. And I've never seen a year in which we had such a hurried kind of a context to do something. We're always complaining we don't have enough time, and we have 2 or 3 months. And now we got a couple of weeks. And what I would say to partners, and I said to cities, is that we got to stay together. I mean, it's so important. You can't have a lot of different agendas, and I think everybody's going to come with their list of priorities, and that's always complex. I know Chair would be well aware of this with her service on JPAC for many years, as well as just on the Metro table. We're not exactly a big state, and so if we come through with 23 different lists of things, it's very complex. But I do know that many of the cities have their own lists and they're trying to coordinate, but as Chris Steffenbach would tell you, it changes by the hour. So anyway, that's enough for me. And Pam, I didn't put together something for a statement. If I had one, it would be that though it's not something that I can understand entirely, I certainly have known people who have had changes, both the clients in my business as well as just personal acquaintances, and there should be no discrimination of any type. I mean, I hope that's the message loud and clear, that we don't tolerate that. It's no, I mean, identity isn't an issue at all, but it's hard when you don't personally completely understand. And so, but I appreciate the two, I don't think they're dueling messages, but the two messages tonight. And I'll certainly support them.
Yep, no problem. As you all should have seen, an email from Elizabeth over a week, maybe even 2 ago. International Transgender Day of Visibility is actually being recognized on Wednesday, March 31st. And since we're not meeting, I problem solved with her and invited all of you to join in making a statement. So my comments will be outlining the Day of Visibility later in March, and going from there. And I knew from Commissioner Treese's reply that she was interested in building off of the comments that I'll be making for us for Washington County. So after I read the statement that I'll be reading, I'll turn it over to Vice Chair Treese. So do feel comfortable, Commissioner Rogers, with what I'm going to be saying. It will be coming from me as an individual, but it doesn't in any way cause a focus on any of us. We just don't have the time, given our meeting schedule this year, to put together a coordinated board statement or recognition. So we're just going with the flow in a positive manner. So, excuse me. Thank you for mentioning the JPACT situation with the earmarks. We received I'd like to segue off of that, if I might. We received an email proposal from our government relations team, and I have a question. I did ask a question about that because that we come together on a county position, but we don't have any meetings after tonight. So in discussing the situation with Ms. Angie this morning, our current proposal is to have a short meeting on Monday, the 29th. And so it would be short, certainly no more than an hour. It's the only thing we need to close on. So we've got information gathering going on by our staff already. And so I assume process-wise that we would just need some time for a quick overview for all of us in said public meeting, and then the benefit of discussion from one another. I haven't had a chance to look at my schedule yet on the 29th. We do know that we have meetings set up for Tuesday. So what had been on our calendar for Monday, the 29th is no longer. So we can all delete that. So I think we are, I'll just ask right now, since there are 4 of us, any preferences as to the timing of that meeting on Monday? And I'm looking to you particularly, Commissioner Rogers, as well. Well, I'm looking to all of you because I know you have outside commitments that I don't have.
I blocked off the entire time. And my thought, if you all would be gracious enough to think about it, would be that we not only have a list, but we communicate our understanding to our city partners as well as regional partners, that we understand it's fluid, but we would hope that, that the emphasis, and I feel a little, how do I say this? It doesn't sound bad. We always would march down to the JPAC table and to our congressional delegation, supporting entirely the JPAC agenda. But I found that some of our friends in other counties didn't exactly do that same thing. And so we want flexibility. We also saw, and I think Suzanne Bonamici will be the same as we've seen from others, that she may have some pet projects, so we'll have to have some flexibility. And again, the chair isn't all had at that because she's been involved, but I'm not sure. I would suggest that we might even look at a B list, so that here's our A list, and here's some pocket projects that, if all of a sudden, for instance, like a TV project, TV highway, that you have illumination and you have sidewalks and you have something, it's a great project and has a lot of emphasis, but maybe there's a couple of million in there that might fit somewhere. So just a suggestion.
Yeah, I agree. The problem remains that we need the opportunity to discuss the number of ideas as a commission after today. So I'm really looking to you for some, spur of the moment direction setting here for us to give to our CAO. Would you prefer like an 8:30 to 9:30 meeting on Monday, and then you're done for the rest? The rest of the day is yours, or something different?
I would suggest 9 to 10 or 10:30, whatever we need.
Does 9 to 10 work? Okay. Commissioner Fye, can you make that work? Okay. So Ms. Angie, go ahead.
So departments have been asked to complete their ideas for earmark requests by March 26th. So just from a timing standpoint, what we will do then is email and post the special meeting packet. We'll email the board when we have the list. So you'll receive an email over the weekend. We will notice the meeting, but post the meeting materials probably early Monday morning, so it's transparent to the community too. So I just wanted to talk through that timing and really appreciate the board's support in this, because our timeline, we need to have the request to Representative Bonamici by April 2nd. So it is a quick turnaround.
Does it matter if it's a work session meeting versus a business meeting? Because we're just giving direction to our staff as opposed to adopting a legislative item?
Madam Chair, if you were going to be voting on it, it should be a regular item. If it was just, blessing what staff has proposed, then that would be a work session would be fine.
But if we're giving thumbs up direction,
It's probably best to have an actual meeting and not a work session, because that line can be a little foggy.
Alan, could we then have a 9 to 10 and 10 week have a scheduled meeting? Because we can do that 5 days a week and then just quick go in.
Right. Yes, you can do that. Absolutely. 9
Okay.
to 10 work session, 10 o'clock regular meeting.
And then Tanya, could I request one other thing? Is one of the things that's important. And I know Suzanne has her priorities, and Earl will have his, and Kurt will have his. But if there was any way that we can show a nexus between our projects proposals, and we can't on some, like illumination, sidewalk, we can't, but if there are others that we can find a nexus with the regional system and how it works, and so that everyone benefits. I've always said project and Gresham benefits us as much as anybody if it's part of the regional system. So could you ask your staff to do that? Because it plays much better to them if they feel that, gee, this is part of the regional system and I'm supporting it, versus that's just some harebrained idea that Washington County has on, any number of, not that they think we're harebrained, but I mean, that's a figure of speech. But does that make sense, Tanya?
Yes, it does. And I was just looking at the participant list and I see our GR team is listening. So they have heard that request as well.
Thank you.
And I believe they've been doing work in that vein as well. So it's just continuing our long track record in that. So, okay, great. So Monday, March 29th, a work session 9 to 10, and then a short board meeting from 10 to 10:30. Everybody okay with that? Terrific. Okay. Since our meeting so I spent time last Tuesday talking about the activities of AOC Day on Monday. So there were some more phone calls last week about how AOC has the various commissioners across Oregon, the 36 counties, have chosen to go about AOC business. And what has become very frustrating, particularly for the multiple counties like ours, Lane County, Marion County, Multnomah County, Clackamas County, is that there are many more urban related, larger population legislative items that have been worked through in steering committees as noticed. And then when it goes to the legislative committee, it gets turned around, particularly with regard to Health and Human Services, or in the case of the 8th, dealing with public buildings and concealed handguns, which wasn't on the agenda. So unfortunately, as I mentioned last week, the mechanism that was put in place to make sure that we were navigating together and had a understood and transparent system for making sure we were doing what we could to draw on common understanding was undermined significantly. So there's some move afoot to remind the body of that, but some commissions, and I do mean multiple commissions, are talking about no longer participating in AOC. I want to share with all of you that I'm not one of those. I think I alluded to that last Tuesday, but there continue to be phone calls around that. So, Commissioner Treese, you wanted to interrupt?
No, I just wanted to ask you a question.
Oh, okay.
And the question is does that explain in part what the kind of strange email from Rob Bovett was about?
I don't know.
I had no context for that email at all. And I think it went to everybody. So I just didn't understand.
Yes, right. So I was in the same activities as you yesterday. So I don't know what transpired after the meetings on Monday. If there was something later in the week with other steering committees or not. So I have a one-on-one with Gina tomorrow, so I was going to inquire then.
Okay, I
But
was
the reason that I'm
just curious.
sorry, did you want to close with something? Okay, so the reason that I'm bringing this up today is that I try to make sure you're not blindsided on things. So I just wanted to make sure that you know that there are some commissions who are quite upset. And so you may hear from some of your colleagues across Oregon. And so stay tuned. I'm assuming that at the AOC meeting in April, there will be some more discussion, but clearly with Rob Bovet's email that we all received, or I saw it on Monday, there's something more going on. So there's that. Then the bulk of, or all of Thursday afternoon and all of Friday till about 12:30, I was participating in the WCVA CEO interviews. Through that process, the search committee, which is a subset of the board of directors, did come to a recommendation that has now gone to the WCVA board of directors. That meeting will be happening on Thursday morning. So that announcement rests with the WCVA board of directors. So, but it was a really good experience. And I think we will ultimately be happy with their choice. So stay tuned on that. Beyond that, down on a lot of business that we're all going through right now. So the last thing I wanted to touch on is with regard to the formal agenda. So I'll hold that until we move to that agenda topic later. So I'm sorry, I actually jumped in after Commissioner Rogers and, oh, but Commissioner Feiss started earlier. Thank you. So we did all go over. For some reason, I felt like I had interrupted the flow. Okay, so next on the agenda, leadership communication. Ms. Angie.
Good afternoon, Chair Harrington, Board of Commissioners. I almost said good morning, but the day is already halfway over. So I think today will mark the last week that I will be providing COVID statistic updates of our workforce because our numbers remain low, and I would rather have this time spent on a vaccination conversation and updating you on that progress moving forward. So isolation, we currently have 2 employees, and we do have 3 employees who are quarantined as they've been close contacts. So as I indicated previously, still low numbers, and really appreciate our leadership at the county as well as our employees ensuring that they continue to be safe and supporting our operations. We are finishing second doses for phase 1A employees next week. So that's exciting news. And we are in the process of updating all employees that they can use the OHA website as well as pharmacies to start to access available vaccines. So the change in the guidance has been that all government employees are eligible for vaccines. We still, as we know, don't have the ample supply of vaccines. The message to employees will please be thoughtful and kind to each other. And so encouraging employees who are unable to telework and need to report to work, being courteous and allowing those employees and others in the community that first spot. And then continuing to encourage telework for employees, as well as we have families who will be starting to move into hybrid learning. And so we want to ensure that we are a supportive work environment. So that message will also be moving forward. I foresee, and this is just personally, as you know, I have an elementary and a middle school student. I feel that the transition to hybrid is actually going to be far more challenging on my family than just the distance learning. And so we do need to just kind of operate through the empathy and kindness lens over these next few weeks. So, and that concludes my weekly update.
Can I ask a question? So the transition to hybrid, I'm lost when the date is for our school districts throughout Washington County to switch over. Is there some commonality between Hillsborough School District, Beaverton School District, Portland School District, Tiger Tualatin School District?
So I believe the dates differ slightly, but it is the middle of the month. So we can get that information and provide that to the board for awareness. But it's around the April 12th to 19th range.
Okay. All right. Well, what I've been wondering about is not, I want to be supportive of all of our employees who need to make the transition for themselves and their families, and as part of the school transition. The federal government has made, or the president has made, announcements about accelerating the availability of doses. As you've all had the opportunity to see, or at least your inbox has the opportunity of receiving, the state has not yet seen any increased allocation of doses yet. So that means that I'm continuing to have in mind for our meetings that we're going to keep going in this remote Zoom setup at least through all of May. So what that tells me in my mind is at least we're not adding any additional transition to our staff for supporting the board. Does that seem helpful? Okay. And I think we should just revisit things sometime in May. If the feds finally come through and the mass of Washington County employees, all of our direct staff that we need to participate and support us in our work session and our board meetings, as well as all commissioners are vaccinated, then we can make plans to start meeting again, socially distanced in the room together. But until we see those concrete changes, I don't think we need to try and jump through any transition hoops. We've all been through so much change together. Let's just keep maintaining some level of consistency. Does that seem reasonable? Go ahead, Commissioner Treese.
I would prefer that approach. We also, there's evidence in other countries that the surges have come back. And so I think what I really don't want to do is come back to in-person, put the staff through that, then have to go backwards. So that's my view as well.
Thank you for reminding us of that. Thank you. Diane, did you have something you wanted to share?
No, I just wanted to say thank you.
Okay. Okay. Thank you, Ms. Angie. Go ahead, Alan.
Yes, Commissioners, last week we had a meeting with Assessment and Taxation in the CAO's office about redistricting, as the charter provides that when we get the census data, if any district is 105% more than the other districts, then we do some redistricting. And the problem has arrived because of the COVID, the census data is late. And it looks like now we might not get it until September, and we're concerned it might be after that. And with that late arrival, it creates the difficulties of doing redistricting before the election. And so we're going to be looking at that and try to come up with a plan, and we'll get back to you about when we will propose to do that analysis. It may not need to be redistricted, based on the 105%. We suspect it will, but that is creating some difficulties for us, and we'll give you some more information later.
So thank you, Alan. As the board well knows, the feds have told all of us that we're not going to get that data before the very end of September. So as we internalized this through our board initiatives, we don't need to hear anything back until sometime in September, when the feds are giving us some clarity as to whether or not they're going to get us the information or not. So,
right. And there's no timelines in the charter, so it's whenever you direct us to do it, we'll do it.
Yep. But we don't need to bother doing it until we have some reliable data. So we'll go from
That's it. Thank you.
So, yes, thank you. So, Diane, Clean Water Services.
Thank you, Chair Harrington, and good afternoon, Board of Clean Water Services. And like Tanya, I do want to shift our narrative on COVID to be focused on supporting our employees shifting with their families to the new hybrid schedule and giving them what they need to be able to get prepared for the vaccines. We're pleased to report we're in the 4th week of no new COVID cases at Clean Water Services. So the team is feeling well. We are seeing a slight uptick in the sewage at the Rock Creek treatment plant, but we don't know if it's a trend yet. So, but it's not significantly higher, but we are seeing an uptick. So we'll keep the board updated should the science team find more data. For the public hearing this evening, I did want to alert you that we anticipate the board will hear some testimony from impacted property owners on item 5A. It's a public hearing for the Northwest Cornell Road and Northwest 107th Avenue reimbursement district. It's the costs for these impacted property owners. The team is working with the property owners individually to utilize as many tools that we can because of the passing of Ordinance 45. Clerk Moss did alert me that there is written testimony that he'll talk to you about that was received last night. But we're prepared and ready to answer any questions for the board after the testimony. And my final thing is there's been a development in this King City sewer case. So they have new legal counsel, and the legal counsel is trying to help the neighborhood find some equitable solutions for their sewer issue. So the team is working with them proactively.
Wow, that's real progress. Welcome news, right, Commissioner Rogers?
Yes.
Yeah.
We'll keep you posted.
Wow, that's great. Okay. Formal agenda. So under item 3, proclamations, we'll add the International Transgender Day of Visibility statements as item C. So I have an item to share, or comments to share on item 4C, adopting the audit committee bylaws. I thought we had a fruitful discussion at our work session or roundtable on this. I've lost sight of the dates now. I totally agree with Commissioner Rogers and Commissioner Willie that we do need to continue to have professional certified accountants, financial experts on a majority of the audit committee membership. My issue has been adding and welcoming community members. So whereas the audit committee has had 4 of these professionals, then there's been the board liaison. So just 5 people total. And what I'm looking to do is to add at least 2 community members. And the current proposal talks about personal accounting and financial experience. And that description still didn't sit well for me because it's not welcoming to community members. So what I did was I turned to a few of our significant committees, like our 2 budget committees and our planning commission, because they do big work for us, right? Our two budget committees program millions and millions of dollars, and then our planning commission does a lot of policy work for us. And I looked at the language for those committees, and we don't require any special experience from them. And so I pondered, okay, well, why is it that we are expecting a higher level of expertise from our community members on this committee than we are for other committees? And so I talked with Ms. Angie about this morning, and I find myself in the situation of either taking the revised bylaws, or the revised bylaws that are in the packet today, which I don't think meets my mark for being welcoming. So choice A for me is just oppose it, or choice B is ask for an amendment to change the description of the requirements so that we would retain at least the 4 professional credentialed accounting and finance experts, continue to have a board liaison, and 2, could be more. I'm not quite sure how we came to 9 members, but at least 2 community members. I think 9 may have come about by looking at the fact that there are 4 professionals plus the liaison, so why not have 4 community members? I think it would be ill-advised for a board liaison to ever go against the professionals. So that's why I'm comfortable if we have fewer than the 4 community members and just have a couple of community members. But I really want to make sure that we are as welcoming of community member interest in the audit committee as we are with all of our other committees. And so I'll either have amendment language to bring into the meeting tonight at 6:30, or I'll be voting no on the current language. So I didn't want you all to be surprised. So that's why under the formal agenda, I'm letting you know where my head is at. So any questions or thoughts?
couple of thoughts. One, I argued obviously for professionals because it's such a unique committee. I'll use a term and I'll apply it to me. It probably wouldn't apply to anybody else, maybe the chair, because she says she likes it too. But this is a pretty geeky committee and has a great deal of expertise that's required in certain areas. So that's why I was arguing for the professional. The only change, I mean, I'm not worried about it. We couldn't even drag enough people in to staff the committee or, to get people to serve in the past. So I guess I'm not too worried about one or two, but the language that I thought might need to be changed is it's very rare. You happen to have 2 CPAs on your board. That's very, very rare. You usually have none. And so if you're going to have a board liaison, it would seem that the language should be tweaked a bit. The qualifications wouldn't apply to the board appointed representative. And why I say that is that how would you'd never have a board member in most board organizations. So, I don't know how I feel about the chair's thinking on the others. I guess as long as you have a majority of professionals who understand what it is, but I would suggest that we might reconsider some of the language as it applies to the board appointed, because I can tell you out of the about 1,800 plus jurisdictions in the state of Oregon who have audits every year, if you have more than a couple of handfuls of people who are CPAs without credentialization, I'd be surprised. I mean, they just don't tend to be there. And yet you have to have somebody on those committees. So anyway, that's just my thought.
Any other thoughts? Oh, go ahead, Commissioner.
I like the balanced approach. My only concern is the other person who had an issue about this was Commissioner Willie, and he's not here to talk about it. So my guess is that he'd be okay, but and I think we need to move forward with this. We can't wait. Isn't that correct? And I think he was fully aware that this was coming on tonight.
I don't know.
Tanya?
Hold tight. I'm connecting with Jack on that because I can't remember that answer. And Jack and I had previously talked about it, and I see he's messaging me right now. So I will just jump in. Alan and I can work on that language for the board's consideration tonight. I will note that we can add this to April. It can be, I would put it on the second meeting in April, not the first meeting, if that's okay.
I'd be more comfortable with that too.
Okay.
Thank you.
And then that will allow us to get proposed language in front of you instead of scrambling behind the scenes this afternoon. I should say Alan scrambling because he's the one who's lap it's in.
I'm drafting that some proposed language up now.
Great. So we'll just postpone it to April 13th. Okay.
Madam Chair, it would be, I believe, the CEO's recommendation would be April 20th as the second meeting. The 13th is a work session.
Thank you, Clerk Moss. I always appreciate that. Is my audio coming through okay?
It
I'm
is,
Because I'm
experiencing
receiving-
breaking up of the chair. Am I the only one that's experiencing that? Okay, so
And it
you are kind of breaking up periodically.
And it freezes, the face freezes, yeah.
Yeah, I'm experiencing that with some of you as well, so. I'm not doing anything. There's no special noises going on today. I did get verification that that very noisy truck outside of my office home office window yesterday was indeed a vacuum cleaning service, a carpet cleaning service. So that was very disruptive. I'll just keep turning mute off. Okay, so item 4C will postpone till April 20th. Thank you very much. Are there any other questions for tonight's formal agenda? Nope. All righty then.
So, Madam Chair, if I may, to dovetail on Diane's comments, you have received 2 testimonies for tonight's meeting, item 5A, which have been sent to your email inboxes. So you are aware of those people testifying, just so we have that.
Yes, thank you. Okay, without further ado then, we'll go to the next item on the work session agenda. Sherwood Urban Renewal, new plan and public building project.
Okay, hello. I am Stephen Roberts, Director of Land Use and Transportation. I'm actually just going to make a quick introduction of the City of Sherwood team. They're actually going to walk you through a proposal for some urban renewal area amendments. So we're joined today by Mayor Keith Mays. I believe we have Julia Hyduk, the city's Community Development Director, and also Elaine Howard, who's an urban renewal consultant who's working with the city on this proposal. And with that, I'll let you all take it away.
Thanks, Stephen. This is Keith Mays, Mayor of Sherwood. I'm excited to be here today to show you our proposed Sherwood 2021 Urban Renewal Plan. If you'd go to the next slide. Roadmap, what we'll cover, discuss the background, discuss the role of taxing districts, the impact on taxing districts, and review and approval steps. Next. So why is Sherwood proposing a new urban renewal plan? Next. I was on the Planning Commission back in 2000 when Sherwood formed its existing urban renewal plan, and then got elected on City Council that winter. This is the original existing urban renewal area. As in the black dashed line was the original footprint. Then last fall we shrunk it down to the lime green area. It is a very successful urban renewal district. We'll talk about that in a second. It's going to be completely wrapped up in another couple years. For orientation, you can see the roads to give you kind of a direction. Pacific Highway is going diagonally on the screen. Langer Drive, Twalton Sherwood Road that you're familiar with. Next slide. Just another existing boundary after we made the reduction, a little zoomed in. Next slide. The projects we completed in our urban renewal district, here are some of them. We did the Cannery Development Plan in Old Town Sherwood. On the east side of the railroad tracks was what we call the Cannery District. The city, or the urban renewal district, bought all of the land that made up of the Cannery District from willing sellers, and prepped it for redevelopment, including public development. We built a Cannery Plaza on part of the land. We installed all the utilities and streets. We contributed towards the City Hall Library. The district contributed towards the Sherwood Center for the Arts. We redid all of the streets in Old Town on the west side of the railroad tracks. All of the utilities underground. We put all of the above ground utilities that we had in, and put those underground. And it was no small feat. It made up a big chunk. Just core roads and utilities made up a big portion of the district. We were gifted part of, and we bought part of an old theater in Old Town, but we had to unfortunately take it down because it was structurally compromised from a couple earthquakes, and then it was full of asbestos, so that was fun. And then the program also helped do a lot of facade grant improvements in Old Town, so we improved the building stock in Old Town. We made other investments in the community here and there, as well as some other streets outside of Old Town. Next. Here's a map of the Cannery District and some of what has occurred. The largest residential development in Old Town is part of the Cannery District, where you see the residences at Cannery Square. You see the plaza that was built, the Sherwood Community Arts Center that was built. All of those roads and parking were built. That's all on the east side. On the west side, you'll see the text where it says City Hall Library, and then you'll see all of those concrete streets that are a lot of what we did. Next slide. Next. So here's some photos of the actual completed project for the Cannery Plaza. Next. Next. Those apartments, some good, nice, high density housing in Old Town, the highest density, some highest density housing in Sherwood, in fact, so far. Next. The library, City Hall, yeah. The Art Center, very successful. That is a part of the old cannery. On the bottom right is a photo of the old cannery, part of the old Cannery District that we bought. If you're wondering, it used to process primarily vegetables, but also some fruit. Streetscape, photos, examples of improved streetscape and public parking. Keep going. Here's a before and after shot of one of the streets that we rebuilt. Some cracked old stuff. So our existing urban renewal will close out in 23. It would have closed out earlier, but the state law on urban renewal districts changed about a decade ago. So instead of closing it out early, because it was so successful, it was kept in place, but revenue gain got shared earlier. But then when we reduced the boundary last year, we put another $185 million in assessed value back on the tax rolls. And the benefit to Washington County's budget was a gain of $373,000 annually.
Mayor Mays. I'm
Yeah.
sorry. I just want to highlight, hello, Julia Hyduk. Just highlight that the reason why we reduced the boundary was in part to add more assessed value back into the tax rolls. It wasn't necessary for the existing urban renewal agency, but it also provided room for us to consider this new URA that the mayor is going to talk to you about.
Yeah, it was a trick that I did not know existed, and I learned it last year. And I said, well, here's an opportunity, because we have some important projects that we want to, that we still need to address in our community. And so here is the map for our proposed new urban renewal boundary. The lots are in yellow, and then right-of-ways are in red.
And
So
we're
again,
going to get more into detail on those right-of-ways. It's actually not the full right-of-way. It's a narrow swath of right-of-way to allow one of the projects that we're proposing is for broadband investment. And so this allowed that by having all of these included, it allows us to do that within the URA.
Yep. Next slide.
Can I ask a question?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, Catherine?
So, thank you, Mayor Mays. It looks like from this picture that urban renewal areas, we used to call them areas, they don't have to be contiguous.
Well, they all have to be connected. So they're cherry stems connecting. So they're absolutely all connected, but they don't have to be parcel connected to parcel. You can have, I learned because I asked a question, cherry stems. We paid, somebody got a nice fee to draft the legal description of this mess. But the benefit is we're able to accelerate a priority of the city of Sherwood by this creative approach.
Yes, we've been told that this is going to be the most complicated legal description that our consultant has ever written, but we like to be famous for something. So
am I correct in understanding that by having these yellow areas connected by, it looks like there might be two different colors of red, but at least the color of red marked urban renewal right-of-ways?
Yep. And right. All of the red, be it one shade or another, is the proposed urban renewal right-of-way.
Okay. So by defining it this way, you're able to make improvements not only for these yellow properties, if I can use that word.
Yep. Lots. Yep.
But also in all of these connecting right-of-ways, whether they be improvements for roads, sidewalks, street lights, any kind of government infrastructure to, fiber for broadband, whatever. So I see you shaking your head yes. So I'm on the journey with you.
Yep, you got it exactly right.
That's what I wanted to make sure.
This could have been in the project list. It could have been any type of utility. It could have been these are a lot of it going to be kind of in the sidewalk type areas, so they could be fixing sidewalks, planting street trees, street lights, host of things. And for us, it'll be predominantly Sherwood broadband.
Thank you very much. Thank you.
Great question. So here's the distinction. Not all of our land that we're proposing is in the city limits today. So here in the green checkered are lots that are currently outside of the city limits, but in the Sherwood urban renewal or urban growth boundary area that we expect to be brought in during the life of the urban renewal area. But it's also why we need your support for us to include it. The most significant being on the right side, and that's all the Tonkin employment area that still hasn't been brought into the city limits, but we expect to happen soon.
And Mayor?
Yes,
Keith,
right.
Keith, yeah, good to talk to you. You and I have known each other a long time, so
Absolutely.
long time. Would it be helpful for you or Julia to mention, because it's a fairly unique city in terms of its age, been around a long time. You used to have a tannery. You used to have all these cannery rows. My recollection's a little foggy because it's between Tualatin and Sherwood. I think when the riverboats used to go up and people say they really did, they used to have them on the Tualatin. I think there was a lot of produce that came to the city of Sherwood from all parts of Washington County. And did you have you had a brick factory? You were Tualatin.
Yes, in Sherwood, in the cannery area, before it was cannery, it was a brickyard, a brick factory.
Yeah, you made brick.
And that's why,
I'm sorry. And that's why the area looks like it's a little odd, but it developed differently because of the age of the city. It wasn't like Hillsborough where you had a downtown defined area. You had different areas that grew because of what they were producing or doing. It was a hub of commerce in Washington County at one time, and now you're going back and retrofitting all that as your city grows. Am I getting most of this correct?
Commissioner, you're absolutely right. So Sherwood is one of the oldest towns in Washington County, certainly much older than Tualatin and Tigard. And we existed in no small part because of the railroad track, and we had a railroad stop. And so life evolved around the railroad tracks, bringing products in and out. And so we originally were making bricks for a lot of downtown Portland buildings. Then that got replaced with canneries to process goods off the land of Washington County. We had a tannery, which for a number of years, which has been its own little problem that we're still addressing. And we were a sleepy little town. As other towns started to grow, Sherwood was still 3,000 or 4,000 people in the early 90s. When I moved to Sherwood 25 years ago, we were about 4,000, and then we went on a growth spurt. And so outside of Old Town and a little bit of what we call the Washington Hill neighborhood, the rest of Sherwood is quite new, just because the town, Portland metro area finally engulfed, came to our shores, and families didn't think it was that far to drive anymore. Instead of way out in Sherwood, it's just like, oh, it's just Sherwood. So we, being over 100 years old, the original urban renewal district helped improve and replace 100-year-old services in Old Town, and some legacy pollutants as well. So now we're moving forward into the year 2021, and we have more needs and more things to help make us a sustainable community from a revenue and employment based perspective. Next slide. So background on the plan formation, why we want to do another district is needs for the Wetumpka employment area. We definitely want to we need to do some investment on core utilities to help that be successful. And that was the start of it. And then we kind of looked at what else do we need in our community. So go to the next slide. So proposed projects, the vast majority of this is good old public infrastructure, water, sewer, stormwater, transportation, and pedestrian safety to help grow jobs in our community. Certainly with that will be increased property values. Broadband is important. It's certainly been highlighted in the pandemic. We have been making piecemeal investments for 15 years on the public, the government side and the commerce side, but we had not done as much on the direct to home side. And that is part of the emphasis here. Public building, we have a need to have a new public works facility, and that ties into cannery because we have this polluted site that needs to be cleaned up, and it's a good spot to put a community building. And then again, to assist development around the community. So next slide. Here's the estimated dollars we would spend on a variety of projects, either in total from an urban renewal perspective or combined with other dollars. For those that have kind of lived in or worked with urban renewal projects, numbers change over time. For a variety of reasons, you might get a grant to do a project somewhere else, or a grant to help with a project. So you make adjustments through the life of the district. But Roy will be familiar with some of these things and others. Oregon-Tonkin intersection is getting now quite dangerous. Oregon Street improvements on the city portion of Oregon Street, which will be along the Tonkin, along the tannery, where the tannery used to exist. And part of Oregon Street needs water quality facility. We're going to invest in a plaza and parking in Old Town. A bigger item is for pedestrian safety, is a pedestrian bridge over Highway 99. It's been a priority, and we received some state ODOT or lottery dollars. Then it went away. We're hoping to get it restored. This whole mess of things that they've been dealing with in Salem. We are going to put Sherwood Broadband in those cherry stems that you saw on the map. The Cedar Creek Trail undercrossing, it's not overcrossing, it's an undercrossing. So we're building out, we have a pretty nice trail network in parts of Sherwood. We were expanding that as part of linking one side to the other. We need to go under 99. So that is a partial investment. It is not that, it is much more expensive than that. Then we have some road improvements along 99. Cedar Brook Way extension is important. Next slide.
Keith, before you do that, can I go back to that one just for a minute?
Absolutely.
I really want to compliment you on two things. One is the 99W Ped Bridge. I know that's really important to you, and it was a big ask for $12 million, roughly a little more, to do that. And your urban renewal, you're going to pick up 2/3 of it. So I would suspect you're either going to have a federal ask for the other $4+ million or some other, but I think that's a compliment to you for putting that in. And then that Cedar Creek Trail it's under, as you say. That's impressive as well, because I know you've looked at trail money for that, and to put that in the urban renewal and accomplish that, that's a great plan. I like them both.
Yeah, as a reminder, and the chair will let you talk. The pedestrian bridge connects near our YMCA across to our new high school, and while by the letter of the transportation engineer, what we've built is safe. let's be practical and let's remove kids and families from the equation so that they are truly safe, and it's got great support in the community. We, again, with the Ped Bridge, it is, by the nature of how ODOT works, believe it or not, we do not have to federalize the project. We do not want to federalize the project, so we can get it done faster and at a better price point. So we want non-ODOT money. We want from the state to help make it happen. So it'll be lottery money, and then we'll see where we're at price-wise, and we'll see see if we have enough. But we'll get it built for sure and figure out how to get the last dollars in the bank. The Cedar Creek Trail undercrossing has to be federalized, and so we'll be pursuing federal dollars for that. Catherine Harrington? Oh, you're muted.
Thank you. I did have some similar questions. So for the 99W Ped Bridge, you mentioned, and I knew that you'd gotten lottery funding for that. So is the total cost for the bridge estimated at $12 million? So the URA is providing $8 million to the tune of $67 million? Or help me account for that lottery contribution.
Yeah, we think that the final is going to be 10 to 12. And so we think 8 will come
Okay.
from the urban renewal, and then we were awarded $2 million 2 years ago from the state lottery, and then we were penciled in a bill that we thought would if it was voted on, to get another 2 or 3 last year, but the vote never happened, and then they didn't fund any of those lottery projects. Well, they did fund it other ways, but we had to
Okay.
get it
All
restarted.
righty, so the 67% is of your total cost for that project, correct?
Correct.
Okay, thanks. I see Elaine nodding her head as well.
Yeah.
And then so for what either the board will be taking action on and/or what your city council will be taking action on, the Cedar Creek Trail will be noted as an undercrossing for sure.
Yes.
Okay, and then is your approximate 7.5 million an estimated total cost, or is that?
It is an error, so it will probably be double that.
Okay,
For the final cost. So the 7 is the
Okay.
contribution from the plan, the area, and then we'll need additional dollars.
got it.
And
Okay,
if we're successful, yeah, and we're building. In fact, the ODOT just opened the contracts. They're going to award the contract this week or next, for the length of the Cedar Creek Trail from Old Town to 99, and then we'll be pursuing other dollars from 99 out to around to Roy Rogers Road. We
okay.
have all the right of way, and it's all planned.
Thank you very much.
Yeah.
Okay, well thought out projects. I just wanted to make sure I understood them correctly.
And we
Thank
do
you.
have another page of projects, so you might have additional questions when the mayor gets to the next slide.
Okay,
Oh.
thank you.
This tannery site. So we had a tannery that had that not the super nasty chromium pollutant, but the lesser nasty chromium pollutant. Part of it had been cleaned up by private developers, and the easier stuff had been cleaned up. The harder stuff is in now public ownership. It's actually the county controls it. We're working to get it cleaned up, and to take over the ownership and on it build a public works facility, which you see on the list down below. Then we have transportation needs, water needs, sewer needs, stormwater needs in the Tonkin employment area. We want to access more developable land near, when driving through Sherwood out on 99, we have what used to be an Albertsons and Safeway out on the corner, and then we had an undeveloped corner. Well, by extending Langer Farms Parkway, we can provide access to an undevelopable corner of land on the highway. Talked about the public works facility. What we've shared, our intent is to relocate, build a new facility that meets our needs for the future, and then put our existing public works facility, which is in Old Town, in what we kind of the cannery area, on the market for redevelopment. So it would be putting property back on the tax rolls for a gain for everyone's benefit.
And just for perspective, when the mayor showed you the slide of the cannery and the apartments, our existing public works facility is literally right next to those apartments. And so we certainly envision that it could be a much better complementary use than what's there now.
Yeah. Part of what I've learned in my 20 plus years of services, and the importance of downtowns is having a mass of people, so that you have folks living and working in your in your downtown, or in our case, our old town, which is way off of 99, gets no traffic, no visibility. But if you have a built-in customer base for those businesses in Old Town, because they live there, they work there, then it helps. It's like the idle to the engine, and that they're always there and able to support those businesses. And then people come and check out, want to come, that live in other parts of town or in other cities, will come into Old Town and want to see what the excitement's about. So by putting the existing public works in redevelopment and getting more folks living down there, then it will make Old Town thrive even more. We want to provide some developer incentives, helping, and then we have some financing fees for what, because the tax increment financing, you're always borrowing money through the life of it, admin expenses, and then total expenses. Next slide. Elaine, is this where you were going to take over?
Sure. I will try to stumble through this because this is the very first time we've had this issue come up in an urban renewal area. So as you adopt an urban renewal plan, you have to establish a maximum indebtedness for that plan. And as we've talked about before, maximum indebtedness is the total amount of money that you may spend on projects, programs, and administration. So when we were putting together the Sherwood plan, Sherwood's assessed value was at a point that triggered some relatively new statutory restrictions on what that maximum indebtedness amount might be. Those restrictions are based on the assessed value as determined by the assessor. The problem is the assessor doesn't determine that assessed value until after an urban renewal plan is adopted. So we tried to figure out, well, okay, now how do we navigate this? And so we talked to an attorney for the city and asked whether we could state in the plan that the maximum indebtedness would be the lesser of the $166,600,000 that's established by doing our financial feasibility analysis, or whatever we get when we go through the analysis once the frozen base is established. And because we're saying the lesser of and give you an established number for that amount, the attorney said that he thought that that was an acceptable way to address the conundrum. So we don't know exactly what the assessed value will be if it ends up being lower than the $166.6 million. The city, and we've built into the plan, the city may do a minor amendment to reduce the maximum indebtedness to the level as established by the assessor's office. So it's a little different than any plan we've done. Do you have any questions on that, or do you follow the issue?
I have one question. If that's the case, I mean, how you do these URAs is you extend bonds, and you don't know the bonded amount, so you really can't sell them unless you do them in a couple of different issues. So it's a timing issue that I understand, but why not? Why are you before us now? Why not wait until you know the answer to that in a few months?
The assessor doesn't establish the frozen base until the plan's adopted.
So you adopt. I get it. That's a two-step.
It's a weird thing.
Yeah. Okay.
So, you learn something new each time, I guess.
You do. Yeah.
We have made our best estimates on what we think that value will be, and we'll adjust that if necessary. The bonds, the bonds typically aren't issued until the area starts getting in an income flow, or until you know that. So that shouldn't hold up the city in terms of what they want to do. The assessor will establish that frozen base fairly quickly after the plan is adopted, if it gets adopted. So it's not really going to hang us up in terms of what the city wants to do. It just is a different confusing step.
And yeah. The next slide.
Next, yeah. So there are two things that we need. Mayor, did you want to cover this?
You can, you're,
Oh,
go ahead.
I'll hit it. And then if you want to add anything, go ahead. There are two different areas where we need assistance from Washington County on the approval of this plan. The first is in 2019, the statute on urban renewal was changed so that expenditures on a public building project has to be approved by 3 of the top 4 taxing districts who forego the most revenue in the urban renewal plan. Those are Washington County, the Sherwood School District, the City of Sherwood, and Tualatin Valley Fire and Rescue. Those changes were a result of the Special Districts Association of Oregon saying they wanted more input on spending urban renewal funds on public buildings. So the mayor has explained very well their public building project where they're moving a facility out of an area where it's not really the right area for the public works facility. There's a much higher and better use for that property. It moves it to an area that they're also cleaning up. But for them to be able to put that specific project in the plan, we will need resolutions from at least 3 of the 4 taxing jurisdictions concurring with the inclusion of that project. If you don't concur with the inclusion of the project, the plan is still good, but that project may not be included. So if they don't get 3 of 4 concurrences, that project has to be removed. Chair Harris.
Catherine? Sure.
You're muted.
Sorry.
I was just wondering about the timing of that concurrence. Does it need to happen? So in our topic sheet, you've tried to really well inform us about your dates in April and then your city public hearing by May 18th. Do you need that concurrence before your planning commission meeting, April 27th, or no later than May 18th?
No later than May 18th.
But if we gave it to you sooner, you'd be just as happy.
That'd be really nice because it just makes us be able to check off those myriad of boxes that have to be checked off on the approval process.
Yeah, the fire district asked us to present this afternoon as well. They wanted to approve their portion of the process quickly as well. So it's up to you and the board on the when you'd like to bring up the topic. But if you did it this month, that would be awesome.
And Chair, I would note April 6th. I was just going to say April 6th is the tentative date that we've identified for the public building concurrence action.
Awesome.
Great. I missed that. Thank you, Stephen. I'm on board.
Next slide. So I'll hit these also. We like to be very transparent about the taxing district impacts. Those are impacts to the taxing district's permanent rate property tax revenues. It's applied only to the growth in value and the SS value in the area. The projections are for impacts estimated through fiscal year end 2052. That's estimated to be a 30-year urban renewal area. These taxing district impacts do anticipate growth above the 3% allowed by statute. A lot of that growth would not happen unless that infrastructure is put in, especially in the Tonkin employment area. So the estimates may seem high, but they're high based on projections of new development, new jobs for the community, new assessed value after this gets terminated that wouldn't occur unless urban renewal was able to help provide that infrastructure. Next slide. So the projected impacts to Washington County for the new urban renewal plan would be around $35.2 million over the 30-year life of the plan. As Mayor May said earlier, the existing area is estimated to terminate after fiscal year end 2023. And I just wanted to clarify one thing. We talked earlier about that 373,658 that would be returned to the county. That's actually the amount that will be returned when the area terminates in fiscal year end 2023. That's based on what the impacts were for this year, this fiscal year, as the County Assessor's Office puts out a report called the SAL 4E report on urban renewal impacts. So it comes directly from that report that is issued by the County Assessor's Office. So that's just for you to internally know that you will be getting some money back, as well as potentially having future impacts. Next slide. This just shows those annual impacts by year. So you can see you don't hit that $370,000 mark that you're getting back as a new, that offsets these other impacts up until fiscal year end 2028. At that point, those impacts start growing.
Elaine, just to clarify though, because we reduced the size of our existing URA, they are already getting back or will be getting back that revenue.
Right. And I don't have that number for you on what you're getting back. I could get it for you before the next meeting if you want. That the other number is based on what's left in that area. Next slide. So this is just the review and adoption steps. So the next step projected for you would be April 6th for your consideration on the action on the public building, and then on May 4th for consideration of the action on actually approving the plan due to the fact that it has unincorporated properties within the area of the plan. That is also both are by resolutions adopted by the board, action taken by the board. Chair?
So do we truly have to wait on the second item until May 4th because of work that has to be done above?
I don't think so.
We could in fact do both of them April 6th if we so chose.
I think so, and unless your staff says there is a reason they wouldn't want to do that.
Okay.
Yeah, I would say, Chair, I think we might be hard pressed to get both items prepared for the April 6th agenda, but I don't know that there's a reason that we need to wait until May 4th for the second action. We could potentially move that up a little bit earlier.
Well, I'm not intending to add any stressors to staff, given everything that's already on your plate. I just wanted to ask the question so that you know if sooner is possible. I don't see any reason why not, assuming that we don't need an extensive presentation and all that.
Right. Okay.
But I don't know how my colleagues feel about it. Those were just my thoughts.
Next slide. I think we covered this. It just is the potential next actions.
Next slide. More questions? As you might imagine, in addition to being very creative with this plan, we're also going to be creative and take advantage of current borrowing costs, and the city will initiate projects before we actually have the tax. It's my expectation. I mean, I can't speak for my council, but we're making plans to do projects in advance of actually having the tax increment financing by having the city borrow the money and then having the urban renewal district pay the city back to help accelerate the economic benefit and community benefit of this proposed plan. Catherine?
Can I ask a question? So I appreciate the thoughtfulness of this plan and that you all returned that 185 million of assessed value from your prior urban renewal work to the tax rolls, or contributed it to the tax rolls, because but for those improvements that you made, nobody would have realized the $185 million of assessed value. If you could go back a couple of slides. So you've made it clear that the county will be receiving approximately $374,000 by the fiscal year ending in 2021. Thank you. Now this slide right here, these are your estimates of what the urban renewal area will be capturing.
Right. Yes. I got in trouble on a previous urban renewal area where we were trying to mix apples and oranges. So let's not mix them. This is just the impact of the new proposed urban renewal area.
Yep. That's why I wanted to go back to this.
Yeah, I appreciate that. Yeah. And the other thing I was supposed to comment on here and forgot as I was going through is there may be a very minimal impact on your enhanced sheriff patrol and urban road maintenance, because there are two very tiny parcels within the area that are within those districts. And at the point that they annex, they would no longer be in those districts. So just to make you aware, we estimated some impacts in letters we sent to you. Those estimates are probably way and above what the real estimates will be for those areas, because they are just two really tiny parcels. And thanks for bringing this back so that I could jump in and clarify that.
So to slow it down just a little bit, Elaine. So we have multiple commissioners have ESPD and in their districts, plus public safety levy is countywide. So for the subset of unincorporated areas in this proposed plan area, there's only two very small ones that are in ESPD. And so I appreciate that there will be a minimal hit.
Okay, and I'm going to make sure Chris is on the call, and she sent me that information. So Chris, can I make sure that that is the information you sent me so that I don't?
Yeah, we had staff, chair and board, we had staff do a little mapping to see what parcels really were. There was 2 ERMD parcels, I think, and there were a few more enhanced sheriff, but it's very small. But we will, per Alan Rapollet's advice, we will bring this resolution to you so that you can speak on behalf of the board and ERMD and the Enhanced Sheriff's Patrol. So you can wear 3 hats at one time, and we won't have to bring 3 different resolutions to you. Okay. So we figured that out today, which is nice. Yeah, so it's very small, and they were going to disappear anyway once they became annexed to the city.
Yeah, thank you. We'll get those details moving forward. So the last thing I wanted to make sure to triple check with you, Elaine. So with this proposed urban renewal area, with all the properties and the right of way and this chart. So the urban renewal area will freeze the assessed value for all that area and all those properties. And through the well thought out plan that you've all put together, investments will be made as you've outlined here in the plan. And so this is your best estimate for the increased assessed value over the current rate that we might have gotten, but for the urban renewal being used. So I just want, because we had a little snafu with our recent area in another jurisdiction, and I understand why, not a problem. We navigated through it fine. I just want to make sure that all of my colleagues, Commissioner Treese, Commissioner Rogers, and Nafisa Fai, are comfortable with the financial summary that we've received today. Does it seem straightforward to you? I see Commissioner Treese, thumbs up. Commissioner Fai and Commissioner Rogers, you're all set? Great. Thank you very much for all of my questions. You've been patient with me. Now, colleagues, what other questions might you have? Commissioner Fai, Rogers, or Treese? Go ahead, Commissioner Rogers.
I have two for Sherwood. One, again, this is very unusual urban renewal that you normally see in downtown area or contiguous area, and you've got components. Well, if you complete areas as you build through this, is there any thought to release those areas so that they come back on the tax assessment area, or is it all aggregate? That's one. I got two questions. That's the first one. Is it all aggregate since they all have to be done before you release any assessed value, or can you do it on certain areas?
Well, certainly I did not realize that potential, despite being around for a while with these things. So it will depend on the success of the urban renewal area. We're hoping that it will be wildly successful, like the one that we're about to wrap up was. And then that certainly makes it possible. Additionally, I got to believe a few years down the road, at a minimum, we'll modify to remove a lot of the cherry stems, because once that project is done, it doesn't need to stay in the area other than connecting, leaving at least one connection point to each parcel. But then it just ideally will be more successful than the plan states, and in some point in the future, we will be able to release properties, lots back.
Part of the consideration, and many of you know this, is to be able to reach that full maximum indebtedness. If you release assessed value, it makes it a longer time period until you can reach your maximum indebtedness. The growth assumptions that we used in the plan are fairly aggressive, and those growth assumptions are what allow us to reach that level of maximum indebtedness. So yes, your existing area was very successful, and yes, if this area is as successful, you could either close out earlier or release some assessed value. But the reality is, I think it will be a while, because the assumptions are fairly aggressive on the growth.
Yeah, no, thank you for the answer. And I know you released some from the last one, and this one is so disaggregated compared to what I've normally seen in urban renewals. I just thought that. And the second one, I can't remember your map exactly, but a perennial problem for this guy has been a certain property on 99W and Rogers Road that sold all of its access to everybody else, and now it's a landlocked piece of property. And we've heard over many years about the problems. Does this cover that one? Just out of curiosity, it appeared to. That's why I was.
Roy, you're very astute, and you're correct. So at the top center of the map on the screen, it looks like a question mark road. That's Langer Farms Parkway. And in the plan is an extension of that parkway across 99 to connect those around the back of those lots, both that ones that are currently in the city and in the county, to provide access up to that corner. As you point out, because yes, the existing property owner or those his parents, grandparents sold all of the access to 99 to ODOT years ago.
I will simply say hallelujah. I mean, that's ODOT, the county, and the city has had nothing but requests and problems on that site. So when I saw it earlier, I thought, well, is that property? But good job. That's great.
Yeah.
Thank you. That's all my questions.
Two other interesting points that Roy might remember and other commissioners. But if you look on the left-hand screen of the left-hand side of the screen, there are a number of yellow lots along 99 that's in the plan. One of the projects in the plan is money towards connecting all of those roads, all those properties together with a frontage road. It has a long history of neighbors not getting along, and who knows, maybe help with a road project might get them to change their tune and get along.
Would one of those be the Claus property?
Correct.
All right. That's a great one too. Another hallelujah to you.
Thanks, Roy.
Okay, are there any last questions? So go ahead, Commissioner Treese.
I just want to say, wow, this is a lot, and it's a big deal. You know, I'm pleased that you have had the bench strength, so to speak, to pull this all together. So thank you.
Thank you very much. It takes a team, takes a community.
Okay, well, it seems we're all set and looking forward to taking action on this. I'm sorry we kept you. We got started a little late, and we've gone at least 15 minutes over our anticipated time. So sorry about that. But I think we've all had the opportunity to well understand the proposal and have our questions answered. So thank you very much. Very thoughtful plan, and we'll go full steam ahead.
Thank you, Chair Harrington and the board.
Thank you. Keep up the good work.
You too.
Okay, so next on the agenda is our legislative update.
Can everybody hear me and see me okay? Great. Good afternoon, Chair Harrington, Board of Commissioners. My name is Jagjit Nagra, Government Relations Manager for Washington County. I'm joined today by Aaron Doyle and Paige Spence from our county lobby team as well. Next slide, please. Thank you. So in terms of our agenda today, we're going to kick off our discussion in the federal sphere. I want to highlight some of the compressed timeline that we're dealing with in regard to our earmarks conversation, which is a nascent conversation. Next, we're going to shift gears and focus on our state legislative conversation. We're going to kick that off with reviewing our state legislative timeline to help get you grounded in terms of where we are at. And then we'll move into our substantive policy discussion around public safety, health and human services, and of course, land use and transportation in terms of bills that are being discussed at the state legislature. Next slide, please. So, earmarks. As you'll recall, on March 6th, when we were joined by, or March 2nd, excuse me, when we were joined by VSA, our federal lobbyist, that's when we started our conversation around earmarks. For keen observers, that conversation has permutated into essentially two paths with earmarks. One is on the Surface Transportation Reauthorization Bill. You probably saw word of that in our Friday Facts from LUT, and Aaron Doyle has done a good job keeping folks abreast of that. That timeline is going well. We also have another process with earmarks that is entirely new. This is earmarks for the overall appropriations process. At this juncture, only the House of Representatives has indicated support for earmarks. The Senate has not indicated the same support. However, the chairman of the chairwoman, excuse me, of the Appropriations Subcommittee has already stated we are going to appropriate $15 billion for what's known as these community project funding earmarks, if you will, right? And the range of the project is anywhere from approximately $250,000 to $3 million. That is based off of our past experience with earmarks prior to 2010. For those of you who are working in the policy world, 2010 is the year that earmarks went away and we went over to our programmatic appropriation requests. And for those of you, again, who are keen observers, the county is also engaged in that process currently. 3 processes. We're only talking about earmarks for appropriations writ large. On Friday afternoon, after I sent the board their weekly memo, we received word that the timeline had changed. We were under the impression that the timeline was April 16th to get our requests in. I had timed that such that the GR team would be coming ahead of the board on April 6th, and that would give us 10 days to put in your recommendations, your thoughts, your priorities, and have 10 days to staff to do that. Well, that's off the table. The deadline is April 2nd. So GR team has been working hard over the weekend. We've been working hard with our departments. And what I am proposing, assuming the board is okay with this, is that our departments give us their ideas for their earmark requests by March 26th. We will then submit those earmark requests for review by the Board of Commissioners and the County Administrative Office between March 26th and April 1st. And then we would submit by close of business on April 2nd. Now, going back to that March 26th to April 1st time window, we do not have a board meeting scheduled for the 30th, but we did, I believe, schedule as of leadership communication this morning or this afternoon, a time frame on Monday the 29th. And my hope, if the board is comfortable with it, is that we can talk about how we're going to prioritize our earmarks during that so we can have the board bless that proposal. Are we comfortable with that? Chair Harrington, go ahead.
So we're having a work session from 9 to 10 on Monday, March 29th, and then we'll have a business meeting from 10 to 10:30. So we're all on the same page.
Wonderful. We look forward to discussing these earmarks with you at that point. So we are going to be working with departments to get this going. It is a compressed timeline. I want to give you some more insight. There are 12 appropriation bills that fund the entire government, right? Big ones are THUD, Transportation, Housing, Urban Development. Another big one is Defense. We have not even received clarity from the House Appropriations Subcommittee which of the 12 bills are ripe for earmarks. We are, in a sense, shooting in the dark. This is an interesting process, I will put it like that. The other piece that you may find interesting is that we still haven't received guidance from our congressional partners. We do know that Congresswoman Bonamici, our House of Representatives member, will be receiving 10 slots to advocate for. That does not mean she will be getting 10 slots funded. It'll likely be 1, maybe 2, could even not be 1. You don't know how these things are going to go. But if we put forth a good effort, I think there's a possibility that we could get quite a big win here. And that's why I'm stressing our engagement with Senator Merkley on appropriations and Senator Wyden in a more powerful position on finance. That positions us well. If there's not any other questions here, is everybody comfortable with it? Go ahead, Chair.
I just wanted to say, and I say this knowing my colleagues, thank you very much to our GR team. That includes the 3 of you, plus our federal folks that you work very closely with and coordinate with. Thank you for embracing the concept of plan to replan and to pivot. You're having to do it at an extraordinary time to an extraordinary level. I'm sorry you're having to endure that, but we know that we are very well served by you. So thank you for giving us your best as you are able to. We are trying to not contribute to that chaos, but rather be available, have the benefit of your recommendations, your knowledge, and your experience. So I'll leave it at all of that, but I thought it was important to make sure that you have the opportunity to hear that from all of us. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. I know the team appreciates that. We feel like palm trees in this moment where we were quite strong, but hyper flexible because we need to be. So with that, we can move on to the next slide. So now we're shifting gears entirely. We're back to the state, right? Our state legislature. So we've seen this slide a couple of times. Just want to let you know that March 19th, that's 3 days from today, that is the deadline for scheduling work sessions. So a majority of the bills that will be considered during this legislature will likely be posted by the 19th. There are a few members who have special privileges, and hopefully they don't exploit those privileges too much. April 5th will be when the floor sessions are scheduled to begin, and then April 13th will be the deadline for holding the work sessions in the first chamber. Next slide, please. So, public safety, big half of my portfolio. I want to give you a very quick update on community corrections. This is a priority item for the county. House Bill 5004 was discussed last week. Commissioner Willie did a fantastic job advocating for our needs there. He was able to actually kick off the hearing, and we kicked off the hearing talking specifically about community corrections, and then I lined up a chorus of other voices to keep that going. As you can imagine, the DOC budget is quite large, right? The majority of their money goes to prisons. Community corrections is a small piece of that, but I made sure that our voice was loud and proud in conjunction with 36 other counties. Senate Bill 497. This is part of our strategy in terms of securing more community corrections funding by getting funded through the Department of Corrections vis-a-vis grant and aid dollars for the supervision of certain domestic violence misdemeanors. This is a best practice. We already do this work in large quantity. We just aren't being paid for it. This would help bring in some of that revenue loss we saw from historic underfunding by the state, coupled with Measure 110. We are working hard to get this bill get a hearing. Chair Harrington was kind enough to issue an email to Senator Przanski, who is the chair of the Judiciary Committee. That committee is very clogged up right now because there are so many matters before them. As I've been saying for almost over a year now, public safety, public safety, public safety. There's a lot of change in this, and a lot of items are being moving through that committee. And as you can see, those deadlines are coming up real soon, right? And so I think what's happening here is there's a bit of backlog, but I'm confident we will get a hearing on that bill. If there's any questions there on community corrections, I'd like to move to House Bill 3071. Okay, House Bill 3071, you may recognize this from our bill tracker. This bill, what it does is it modifies the definition of public or private official. Essentially, for the purposes of this board, what it would do for county commissioners is it would require you to be a mandatory reporter when it comes to child abuse, domestic violence, elder abuse, or other forms of physical abuse or emotional abuse that you may or may not come across. The bill had a hearing, a public hearing last week. I viewed the public hearing, and the committee, there was one group testified in favor of it, CASA, who some of you may know, and all of the committee members were in support of the bill. The work session has now been scheduled for Monday, the 22nd. We have been in a posture of opposing the bill as currently drafted. I wanted to circle back with the board, though, given perhaps some of the political or optic issues with this, and I just want to also get a temperature check if this is a posture we want to remain in. I would suggest perhaps switching to a neutral posture where I can work with the bill sponsors to express our concerns around possibly liability or training or those types of pieces, but I defer to the board on that. Yes, Chair?
I'll just start in case this helps my colleagues. I am very uncomfortable being granted this responsibility without having a great deal of training and time and money dedicated to that. Now, right now, I'm the full-time chair with 4 district commissioners who are only compensated at what is considered a part-time level. I cannot fathom, I mean, it's hard enough trying to do my work as chair and support my colleagues so that we get everything done that Washington County needs to get done as an agency to serve our continuously evolving large county of urban and rural areas. So even if they were to guarantee the funding for decades ahead, I think it's too much to ask our district level colleagues, let alone I personally feel as chair, it's a level of responsibility that I am not fit to succeed at. So I'm having a really hard time. I can imagine the value of of taking a neutral approach, but I really think this is way too much to ask of local elected officials. Us at a commission, a county commission level, let alone our colleagues at the Tualatin Soil and Water Conservation District, school districts, Tualatin Valley Water District, THPRD board members, and city councils. So that's my perspective, and I'm very interested to hear what my colleagues think.
I'm happy to make comment here. I've thought about this quite a bit, and I don't, while I respect the chair's comments, I don't know when others are held to mandatory duty to report what type of training they go through, what type of skill development. I believe my understanding is that our county employees are mandatory reporters. Is that correct, Tanya?
That is correct.
Okay.
Based on functional role.
Okay.
So to clarify, based on functional role, does that mean like HHS folks versus road ops folks? So it's not all employees?
That is my understanding, and let me clarify too, and I will get back to you on that. So if you think HHS, juvenile services, etc., but let me clarify.
Sure. Madam Chair, if I may jump in. So typically, my understanding has been this child abuse reporting has been extended to people who deal with children. My wife's a teacher. She is a mandatory reporter. It's been fairly recently expanded to lawyers, but they deal with children and domestic situations quite a bit. And we do have training to the Oregon State Bar, mandatory training on that. So it is an interesting expansion of this child abuse reporting. I mean, I think all of us morally have the duty to report, but to make it a legal responsibility, that's something for you to strongly consider.
So what Jagjit told us is child abuse, elder abuse, domestic violence abuse.
Could I ask another clarifying question? It says modifies the definition of public or private official with mandatory duty to include all county commissioners. This isn't necessarily expanded to other elected officials. Is that correct, or am I wrong?
I believe it also, Commissioner Treese, extends it to city commissioners and other elected board members, such as Metro Council members. So it is an expansion.
And it does include THPRD, it does include soil and conservation districts and that type of elected official as well. Any elected official? I know it already applies. School board is already in this loop, I think.
Correct. So currently, state legislators and school board members are already mandatory reporters. But I do believe this extends out to the smaller agencies like the special districts as well. But I will get more clarity on that following this meeting.
Okay. I have trouble opposing it. And while I respect the chair's position and understand what she's saying, we set the expectation for many others. And I feel strongly that a leadership role should include this type of responsibility as well. But I am uncomfortable with the status of the bill from the standpoint that it doesn't include the pieces that our chair pointed out, training, that type of thing. So I personally have a history of when I was 19 years old, working with children and knowing that one child had been abused and not having any place to go to report that. That continues to haunt me. And I know that's a personal situation, but I just tell you that it influences me to this day. So my sense is that I'm not comfortable again opposing it. I understand the amendments that I think should be included in this. I'm not suggesting that we support it, but I would suggest at this point, at a minimum, a neutral.
Thank you, Commissioner Trees.
Commissioner Rogers, you were next.
It's hard for me to oppose from the standpoint of the optics, but it isn't hard for me to oppose based upon the obligation if I knew it. I don't feel that I do know entirely what that means, and so I'm not sure you want to spend a lot of time here. You might just want to educate me offline, but I don't know the extent of what reporting means. I don't know the extent of observing what my allegations are. I mean, I understand if this were to pass that I have some indemnity underneath the county policy, but what if I'm just terribly wrong? Has such huge implications, and I guess that's the training piece that we're talking about. So is there any quick guidance, or is this too far reaching to spend a couple of minutes on to tell us what it really means to us, well down to very simple terms?
I'll be very brief, Commissioner Rogers, but essentially in terms of getting it wrong, that is a concern that has been touched upon in the bill. The notion is that as long as you made a good faith effort to report, you have met your duty. If your good faith effort was incorrect, you saw a bruise, for example, and maybe it was from a rock climbing accident, so be it, as long as you made that good faith effort. If you did not make that good faith effort, then there could be consequences.
Can I just follow up real quickly? And that is that good faith, the world is paved with good intentions, and it's not always always good. And so in today's environment where you're reporting, I'm not sure what the confidentiality of that is. I'm not sure what that leads to. So if somebody were reporting something that was totally inaccurate, you could destroy people without fair process and engagement in some sort of a confidential, investigation. So I remember you bringing this up earlier, and I thought I was kind of curious. But do you have any definitions, or is this just this is a terrible situation, which we all agree to, and so we're going to pass legislation that we're not going to have a lot of specifics on what this means for protection, not only of a victim, but maybe erroneous accusations against someone who is charged?
So my understanding is that this would operate the same way that it does if, say, a teacher makes a claim like this, or a lawyer, or a judicial magistrate. And so the process would be the same. I do believe there are guardrails to help protect folks who are implicated or named in this processes, but I will get more details on that and circle back with you, Commissioner Rogers.
Thank you. It just makes me uncomfortable for the optics of opposing, but for the reason brought up by the chair and others, I mean, I feel like stepping in quicksand without really know what I'm stepping into. So,
Commissioner Rogers, Chair Harrington, Board, as Jajit said, we will circle back with additional information, including staff, which are required to be mandatory reporters currently, as well as training provided to those staff.
Commissioner Fye, any comments?
And I used to, when I was a county employee, is my voice coming back? Oh.
You're okay.
Oh, okay. I thought I was hearing an echo. I think, Chair Harrington, you raised a good point about the training piece. But for me, I used to work for a county, and I would have young students who would intern for the county as part of the county internship program. And I remember myself as a county employee, as a mandatory reporter, being required to one of the incidents that was shared with me from the students. And I remember going to my boss and saying, what do I do with this information? And we had to report it to the law enforcement, and it was already reported incident. by the time we were reporting. So I think for me, I like what our lobbyist is suggesting of neutral position for the county. And I think it's important to voice those amendments or those changes that we're requesting. What are the resources available to elected officials to be up to the level where they feel comfortable reporting? And I think it's a good reason. I think those are good suggestions and good concerns to raise. But I think for us as a county, I think it's a good idea for us to take a neutral. And I remember, I think I asked this to our lobbyist, Jagdeep, that I didn't even notice. I thought we were supporting this bill because I'm coming from a public health perspective and also from a former county employee who was required to report these things and was actually trained to do these, to report, not necessarily be accurate, but to be aware, to see harm, and then to let other people, figure it out if it's an actual harm to the young person or the elderly we're trying to protect. So, in all summary of what I said, I support a neutral stand for Washington County.
So, Jagdeep, what you're hearing is, I think, if I could summarize, Commissioner Treese and Commissioner Fye are comfortable today with a neutral stance. It sounds like Commissioner Rogers may be open to neutral with further information.
Perfect. Thank you, Chair. And thank you, Commissioners, for engaging me on this. Commissioner Rogers, I will follow up with you offline.
Actually, we are all looking for further information.
You got it. Commissioner Treese, did you have a question?
I just wanted to say to my fellow commissioners, thank you for having this discussion. I appreciate it.
Okay, and with that, we can go to the next slide and I will hand it off to Paige Spence.
Thank you. Good afternoon, Chair Harrington and commissioners. Sorry, waiting for the slide to change. Okay, great. Good afternoon. I'm glad for the opportunity to just give you guys some updates on legislation. Oh, if we could go back, thanks. Impacting our Health and Human Services Department and our Housing Authority, as well as the communities that you all represent. So first, with Health and Human Services, I wanted to introduce your board to Senate Bill 582 with the -1 amendment. This is a bill that's been brought forward by the State Department of Environmental Quality following a 2-year local government steering committee that included AOC, Metro, and individual cities and counties about recycling. Our Solid Waste and Recycling Division within HHS strongly supports the resulting proposal, which is called Extended Producer Responsibility. And I wanted to just bring you up to speed about the problem that we are aiming to solve with the bill, which is that costs to recycle materials are at historic highs and revenues from the process are at historic lows. And yet we know that Washington County residents and Oregonians, for the most part, still want to recycle. And of course, many manufacturers rely on recycled materials in their manufacturing streams as well. So in short, what Senate Bill 582 does is shift the financial burden of recycling from your constituents, the ratepayers, to the producers of the materials. The bill is still in committee with pending amendments, so I will keep you posted on its progress, but just wanted to let you know that work is ongoing since HHS staff is excited about the possibility. The second item is tobacco retail licensure, and I know that you are all aware of this concept. We've had 2 very strong public hearings and are very hopeful we can pass the measure. The bill should move out of its policy committee into the Joint Ways and Means or Budget Committee tomorrow, which is a great sign, and we are expecting bipartisan support. So we'll continue to update you there as well. Yes, Chair Harrington.
So for these 2 bills, as well as all the subsequent ones, I've not had the opportunity to go through the most recent bill tracker. So on Senate Bill 582-1, I believe we had a position already of support for 582, or at least the concept. So you're reaffirming, you're making sure we know what the -1 includes, and you're reaffirming that we continue to support, right?
Chair Harrington, I could not have said it better. Apparently I didn't say it as well. So yes, that's exactly right. Thank you. This is all informational only on bills of interest to the county that either your board has expressly supported, or that yes, because of our guiding principles and my consultation with our departments, that yes, appear in your bill tracker as a support. Thank you. I should have led with that.
Yeah, and then so for 587, I believe we also were supporting on that. So you're following up. Okay, I'm
That's
with
correct.
you. Thank you.
Yes, thank you for that important clarification.
That extra reminder. Thank you.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you for that. And then finally, under HHS, again, this is a bill that your board already will support, is just wanted to flag that within the next couple weeks, the Joint Ways and Means hearing on the Department of Human Services budget will be coming up. And so we'll make sure to have our department staff, as well as served community members, testify in support of your board's priority to increase our funding for intellectual and developmental disability services, case management, as well as our older adult services. Are there any other questions on health and human services before I turn quickly to housing? All right, great. And I will go ahead and note as well, Chair Harrington and commissioners, that all of the bills under housing as well are I believe, bills that your board will support and are indicated as positions of support in the tracker as well because of the guiding principles. So thanks for making sure I clarify that up front. So first, under landlord and tenant relief, government relations is providing supportive testimony as we continue to support our landlords and our renters through the COVID-19 crisis specifically. So we've been providing support for Senate Bill 282, which creates tools for tenants to avoid eviction once the current state eviction moratorium ends on June 30th. So the components of that bill include a rent repayment grace period, an extended lease termination notice for non-payment, and other measures. And then on the landlord side, we are also providing support for Senate Bill 330, which establishes an income tax credit for landlords equal to any tenant rent non-payment that the landlord has forgiven during the pandemic. And then under homeownership, for all the homeowners in your districts, government relations is actively supporting 2 bills. One that would fund nonprofit housing counseling agencies to offer foreclosure counseling at no cost to homeowners who are at risk of foreclosure from non-payment during COVID. And then House Bill 2009 would reinstate the foreclosure moratorium that was passed during the second 2020 special session and was in effect through only the end of the 2020 calendar year. So this bill would reinstate that moratorium, including staying any foreclosures already through in the legal system that were initiated after that moratorium ended, and then through the end of September 2021, excuse me. And then last but certainly not least, we are continuing to support our homeless neighbors. And so to that end, government relations is advocating for 2 housing funds in the Oregon Housing Agency budget, which is emergency housing assistance, which assists low or very low income folks who are homeless or at risk of becoming homeless. And then also for the state housing assistance program, which helps meet emergency needs of homeless folks by providing operational support for our emergency shelters and supportive services. And just as an aside, I will note that I had a really positive conversation with our assistant housing director today, and I'm told that funding for homeless services between the state and the federal funding streams, that we're in a really good place and being able to support our community well. So we'll be advocating for those items to be able to continue to do so. And that is all I have for you today, unless there are any questions. Thank you for your attention. Great. Thanks for your support. And with that, I think Aaron Doyle is up next, and we can go to the next slide.
Before you do that, can I ask a couple of
for
questions?
all of Page's positive.
Can I ask a question on the housing and homeless?
Absolutely.
Just out of curiosity, and I know that there's apparently a cutoff date on some of this stuff, but how is this going to be paid for? Because nothing is for free, and there's going to be some trickle down to other programs that we are asking for support on, everything from community corrections, the court systems, other health and human service issues. is there any proposal for, my first question, is there any proposal for an income tax increase to fund that? And then secondly, has there been any sort of a macro examination to determine whether or not there's a shifting of resources around the state to those areas who tend to maybe be a little more generous in their relief, and they'll seek funds so that there'll be less of a pot of money for other areas of the state who may not have had the same sort of, as you call them, protections?
Commissioner Rogers, Chair Harrington, and commissioners, that's an excellent question. I would, to be honest, have to go back and run, and I'm happy to do it, an analysis of the total dollar amount allocated to each of these bills, as well as the funding stream, because particularly on the homelessness side, because our operations have been so well funded statewide through some of the federal relief programs, I don't actually think that what we have on the table in front of us in the housing and homelessness realm is actually significantly more than what it is in other biennia. That said, there is a mix of funding streams that funds all of these. So no, there is no question or no conversation of income tax increases. As you may know, tax increases of any kind in the legislature require a 3/5 majority to pass, and that's very difficult. What I will say is that not all of these bills are funded by state general fund. There are some lottery dollars, there's some bonding as well. A lot of it is general fund, but then particularly on the sort of affordable housing and landlord tenant side, there are a lot of tax credits. And some of these are new tax credits that the legislature is considering enacting directly in response to COVID. And then others are tax credits that come up all the time on a biennial basis for renewal, some of which our housing authority does take advantage of. So if you'd like, I'm happy to put together sort of a broader picture for you of housing and homelessness costs in terms of the bills that we are tracking. But of course, that wouldn't be comprehensive of what's out there, for the state writ large. But I will say that, that government relations, I think, amongst our whole team is very judicious in what we support during session. We get lots of requests from legislators and from partner organizations to support their bills. And sometimes the bill has great policy, but to your point, it does cost state general fund dollars and could perhaps compete with the asks that we have out there. So I think that our team as a whole is trying to do a very good job in balancing what we're asking for and keeping your board of commissioners' priorities in mind. But if there's specific analysis on one or more of these bills that you'd like about the funding mechanism, I'd be more than happy to provide that. I hope that helps.
I'll answer you really quickly. My intellectual curiosity should not mean more work for you. I just think that's it's an interesting conversation because, again, I think that there's got to be a reckoning at some point with these dollars, and I don't want us to be saying that certain things will benefit other areas, even though we're one state and one regional. That will come back and bite us at a later date. But that's just, again, do nothing more. Just go do good work. Nothing for me.
Thank you, Commissioner. I will wrap up just by saying, too, that my intellectual curiosity, and I think all of ours, will be piqued in the next few weeks when we see the Ways and Means co-chairs release sort of their Ways and Means framework. We had the governor's budget before session, and now we know that sometime earlier, mid-April, the Ways and Means co-chairs will sort of release sort of a very high-level draft of what they're thinking for the statewide budget picture. And I think all of us are really eager to see kind of how that shakes out and where the legislator is prioritizing putting state general fund and other dollars like lottery bonds and general obligation bonds. So stay tuned for more. I do not have our next Board of Commissioners date right in front of me, but I know that once that framework comes out and as the budget side of session really ramps up, then we'll be sure to update your board.
On April 6th.
April 6th. Thank you, Juji.
And we'll kick it over to Erin Doyle now.
Thanks. I will, much like my slide, this will hopefully be brief. The first bill I want to call your attention to is also on your tracker. This is one that we oppose. We oppose not only for the county and our LUT department's collection of system development charges, but also on behalf of Clean Water Services, who is also reliant on system development charges. There was an amendment and it had its first public hearing this morning at 8 a.m. While I was signed up to testify, they ran out of time, and therefore I was unable to provide my completely cogent and excellent testimony that I was going to provide. I will be writing it down and submitting it to the committee in the meantime. There is a conversation about if they can amend the amendment, proposed amendment to better meet our concerns. However, at this point in time, it would be my recommendation that the only amendment we would really want to see is one that turns this bill into a study of system development charges that is comprehensive and not just limited to the SDC's impact on the price of housing, and maybe focus a little bit more on the affordable housing impacts, but also the cost to do infrastructure in the state and the few tools that exist on behalf of local governments to recoup the costs of development. So with working with a large coalition of others, including the Association of Oregon Counties, we put our logo on some testimony that was submitted by that coalition of local governments that kind of explained why SDCs are the way they are and where they actually sit in the costs of development for the developer of homes, etc. So, Chair Harrington.
Could you just circulate that to the board, please? That's all.
Absolutely. Note to self, or else gets forgotten. Next, on the state transportation investment, there was, again, I listed two bills here because I wasn't sure which one was going to be amended with the new tolling language that we saw. Speaker Kotek ended up submitting an amendment for House Bill 3065. I was able to testify on this bill this morning, reiterating the principles and the priorities that this board sent me down to Salem with in December when we adopted our legislative agenda, strongly supporting any efforts to get the financial plan to match the plan of House Bill 2017, to really focus not just on one side or other, but both pieces of the equation, both the construction that needs to happen on the interstate system and on the system as a region, but also in the congestion relief portion of that, given that those two things kind of need to go hand in hand. One thing we did criticize in the amendment is that there was a proposal for a legislatively mandated jurisdictional transfer of 82nd in Portland from ODOT to Portland, but our concern lies not in the transfer, but in the funding allocation that was put into the bill, that the state would only cover 25% of the cost to bring the facility into a state of good repair. What I stated was it is not in our interest, given the number of areas of ODOT facilities within Washington County, where we also are looking for funding and looking to move forward in partnership, that a 25-75 split was not appropriate and would be, in fact, very concerning for us moving forward as a precedence. There were some other conversations that took place there. We'll be circling back with our local government partners in the region to make sure that we get all of that tolling conversation and authorities correct. I will say that some of our regional partners did more robustly state concerns related to the tolling language changes, believing that more needs to be stated related to congestion relief and or that no pavement should be laid to create new lanes. I don't believe that we are there as a board. We really want to see the right fixes that meet the 2017 obligations, as that was the direction that I was handed by this board. Jurisdictional transfer, I think, is still a very quiet conversation, looking for any sort of resources that we can find, but I don't think it's necessarily ripe for this session, and hoping that the 26 transfer does not subsume any resources that are made available. Finally, as part of that amendment, I will say that one of the things that we supported, that I stated we supported, was related to the set aside money in the 3 years prior to the tolling provisions coming online. Is the amendment would flex it to take it not away from the Rose Quarter, but allow other regional projects in addition to the Rose Quarter that are on the interstates to be funded with that $30 million a year through that 1 cent set aside, thereby flexing the money a little bit better to allow Rose Quarter to continue to move forward, but also to have 205 and those projects which are more ready to go have a source of funding that they can tap into earlier, as well as setting up the infrastructure polling. Finally, on land use and housing, I left this here kind of vague because I wasn't sure exactly which bills I wanted to hit on. On land use, I will say, while you guys were starting your meeting, I was testifying in front of the House Rules Committee on our Little LASIK Lane bill. No opposition came forward. Myself and Aaron Wardell presented, as well as Representative Neron, overwhelmingly supported. Part of that conversation did turn into legislators asking why on earth we were coming to them for issues that should be locally solved. And I said that is a longer term conversation, but it is where it is. And that's the bill. So hopefully that bill will move relatively quickly, as it is non-controversial at this point. The other things that I've been working on is kind of working quietly in the background on some coalition work related to some mandates that are being proposed related to how, where, and what restrictions we can place on housing development in places that are not traditionally necessarily where we would place housing pursuant to our zoning. So a lot of these mandates do not meet our legislative principle related to local control over the land use system. And we are trying to take some of that back so that we can ensure not only are housing units built, but they're built in a way that makes people who live in them connected to our community and doesn't overburden our infrastructure system accidentally. All of these bills kind of are combining to see which one actually shakes loose, and we will be very cognizant of the impacts that could potentially have to any sort of land use process that the county would then have to line up, along with all the other things you guys are trying to get through our LUT departments to try and address the housing crisis. So with all of that super happy news, I am happy to answer questions.
Commissioners, any questions of Aaron?
I have one, Aaron, and I don't, there's not an answer to this, but it'll be, again, out of my intellectual curiosity. The whole tolling issue, when you start talking about off-system impact, and I'm well aware of the 82nd issue in Portland, plus other issues along the 205 particularly. It would be very curious to say what will Washington County businesses and residents be paying in tolls without any apparent benefit, because it'll all be going to other jurisdictions. And I know that sounds awfully parochial and very myopic, but that's been the issue, I think, with Clark County as well. As I've talked to their chair up there at one time about this issue, is that their residents are going to be paying a lot of tolling. And so it'd be interesting at some point to say, well, what are we apt to pay? And if there's no systems improvements other than off systems, what's that costing? And those who are in the economic development area or chamber business or others, you know, what would they testify to us, or what would they say to us in regard to future conversations? So
one thing that the tolling conversation has made clear is that there is an intention to also use those tolling dollars on the interstate system itself as well. That is highly contentious based on the testimony that was presented today, but it will help pay for project changes in Rose Quarter once they get to that through that design process, but also on 205, the Abernathy Bridge, the Stafford Road area, and also if congestion pricing is done correctly, it will lead to faster transit along those for goods and services and commuters. If the congestion pricing is done in a manner that actually does mitigate congestion. So I think those are some of the high level responses. They may not be satisfying to everyone, but it is the direction that ODOT made clear today. And I don't know if we had a next slide or not, but I believe if there's no further questions, thank you for your time, and we'll keep you up to date.
Thank you very much, team. Just keep going, and we'll look forward to seeing you April 6th.
Thank you, Chair. Thank you, Commissioners.
Oh, but we'll also see at least some of you March 29th, too.
Indeed.
Take care. Okay. Sorry, folks, we're about 50 minutes behind schedule, or 45 minutes behind schedule. Sorry about that. Can we shorten things up and take a 10-minute break instead of 15?
So Chair, I would actually suggest we move out the CARES Act Coronis Relief Fund final report. You do have the written documentation. While we were listening to our GR team, Diane and I were collaborating, and I think we can move that to April 20th for board presentation, if you're comfortable with that.
For work session or the board meeting?
Excuse me, work session.
Okay. Okay, board members, are you okay with that? Go ahead, Commissioner Treese.
Having difficulty finding my mute button. So you want to wait till what? This is Jack's report on how we spent the CRF funding. I've gone through that report. You're waiting until the end of April to do that? Okay.
April 20th.
Okay. What impact?
Go ahead.
What impacts would there be with projected new money coming in without having the report from the old money that went out? Any thoughts there? I'm just raising that question.
So the only projected impact, there's no impact with looking backwards. Looking forward, there was a key question of the board appointing 2 members to we'll call it CRF Part 2, but I don't want to call it CRF Part 2. So there's not a jazzy word. So we'll come up with the jazzy word. But the work group,
American Rescue Plan, ARP.
The ARP work group.
Right. Okay. I just wanted to make sure, that we're in that preparation mode as well. I had a chance to go through all the slides. They look really good.
So can I ask? Go ahead, Commissioner Rogers.
Just one quick comment, Tanya. I looked at all of that, and I liked the bubble graph and all of that sort of thing. But one thing that might be very helpful is the cities have always said that they weren't receiving their proportionate share. They understand the Health and Human Services. Is there a way to drill down a bit? So like on the Health and Human Services and others, that we show that there's benefit going to both sides, so it doesn't look like it's just our department? I don't think it'd be much of a change in the graphics to do that.
So Commissioner Rogers, I feel that was almost a leading question, and I know it wasn't. The staff have been working incredibly hard on what is called the CRF Storybook, which really tells that story of not only Washington County, but the partnership and putting the dollars to work. It is in draft format. The staff had intended on sending this out to board members and giving ample time to provide your comments. That would be a report to the community, but also, of course, shared with our special service districts, our cities, et cetera, really showing how the dollars were put to use.
So I have a clarifying question. The great presentation, even though we haven't had it presented to us, I mean, it's an impressive amount of material. There wasn't some other document on top of this though, right? This is it.
This is it for now. The other document is going to be emailed to you. We did not want to add to confusion right before the board meeting.
Got it.
Lend itself to an assumption that needed to be reviewed. So that draft document will be in your email box, I believe, by tomorrow.
Well, so I would just like to suggest to my colleagues to consider today that we direct the CAO to post the slide presentation and the draft report, which we've not seen yet, but it will be marked draft, and post it on our website and send a media release either, or whatever kind of post we do on our front page to say, here is our current report out of those community investments, and do feel free to join us on April 20th at thus and such meeting to hear this report at the board work session. Because staff's done a great job. We just don't have enough time today. So, you know, it's the slide set's public. Let's go keep telling our story. So I think I'm seeing 4 heads nod and thumbs up and whoop, whoop, whoop. So can you do that, Miss Angie? You and staff, keep up that great
Yes.
work. Awesome. Awesome. Okay, so thank you for buying us some time. We'll look forward to hearing more and coming in with any questions we may have on April 20th. So with that, that means I think we can still take a 15-minute break, maybe? Okay, 15-minute break. See you back here at 5:56. Thank you very much, folks. 3:56. Oh, good heavens. Thank you, Pam. Okay, have we got a CAO and a lawyer in the house? I'm going to assume we have Alan and call us back into work session. Thank you. So I'll turn it over to our great staff team on supportive housing services. Comey, Calabar.
Good afternoon, Chair Harrington. Good afternoon, Board of Commissioners. For the record, my name is Comey Calabar. I'm Housing Services Director. Good to be with you. It's a pleasure to be back here with the board and also to update you on the Local Implementation Plan, LIP. This is a draft and it's a major body of work, and the team is preparing for HHS implementation this summer. The framework will define our goals, commitments, and generally what will guide all aspects of the program implementation for the coming years. As you know, the SHS, the Supportive Housing Services Program, is a groundbreaking voter-approved measure. Also, the full draft of the LIP, Local Implementation Plan, has been released to the public for comment, and we are getting so far very supportive feedback from the broad community and also from the partners that will be supporting the work. Our housing staff is proud of this developing framework and is pleased to discuss the content with you and also to gather feedback one more time. This is before we release the final and come back to you for approval on April 6th. So now I turn it over to Josh Kreitz, Jess Larson, and Ali Jamison to present the content of the Local Implementation Plan draft and also outline next steps for our work. They will also answer questions you may have. Thank you very much.
Good afternoon. Yeah, good afternoon, Chair Harrington and Board of Commissioners. My name is Josh Kreitz. I'm the Assistant Director of the Housing Department. Next slide, please. So to go through the agenda today, what we're going to be looking at and reviewing is an overview of the LIP drafting process, review of the priority populations required elements. We have some new material that's really exciting for our review today, which is the proposed plan investments and outcome goals. Review the advisory committee feedback and response, and final steps for the local implementation plan and policy questions for the board. So I want to set these three questions up ahead of time. There'll be another bonus question at the end of the slide, and we'll come back to these. And these are the three questions that we'll hope that you'll reflect on as we go through the presentation today. Does the full draft reflect the board's direction and community needs? Second, does the planned investment strategy balance the need to serve both priority populations and develop a system of care? And third, are the program goals achievable and ambitious? Next slide, please. This is the LIP drafting and approval process. We're bringing this back just to reorient your board to our timeline for the LIP process. I want to draw your attention to three items on here specifically. The first being at the top there, March 10th through the 24th, which indicates that the public comment period is open. That's exciting. And we'll bring those comments and reviews back to your board. Today, the board is advising on the full draft of the LIP. And then the next event, which is April 6th, the board votes to approve the final draft. Next slide, please. So when we're looking at the LIP required elements, as you may remember, there are several different required elements that our plan has to be able to speak to. The analysis of the current system investments, remaining unmet needs, analysis of racial disparities and strategies to advance racial equity, those implementation commitments, which include serving priority populations, housing first practices, and maintaining current investments, geographic equity, regional coordination, and strategies to leverage investments, and equitable procurement, capacity building, and pay equity. And then the other points on the slide that cover is plan investments and outcome goals, evaluation, and accountability. I'm going to turn it over to my colleague, Ali, who will now be speaking to the other parts.
Ali was on.
Ali, if you're on, I think we can't hear you. I see you. Okay, so I'm going to jump in and kind of cover this slide, and then we'll see if the technical difficulties can be handled. So priority population A, when we're talking about the priority populations, which you're going to hear referred to in the slide deck today, we want to ensure that the board's oriented to this again, because again, we keep coming back to this. Population A is those who are experiencing or at imminent risk of experiencing long-term or repeat homelessness and extremely low income and one or more disabling conditions. And just as a reminder, 75% of program investments must serve priority population A. When we discuss priority population B, those are the individuals and families experiencing homelessness, at substantial risk of experiencing homelessness. And again, 25% of the program investments must serve priority population B. Next slide, please. Ali, can we hear you? Not hearing none, I will keep on going with the presentation, okay? So just as a summary for some of the advisory committee feedback that we heard, there's been a lot of agreement, support, and appreciation for the working draft and the additions requested. And some of that is described disproportionate impact of homelessness on specific populations, include regional data and better data sets to better understand the need. Describe how SHS investments will scale up current services and fund different services, which of course is a really important part of this. Clarify intention to invest in a network of culturally specific service provisions. Clarify the plan for alignment with other investments like mental health and affordable housing programs. Clarify commitment to pay equity and describe commitments to ongoing advisory and shared governance making bodies. So one thing I would call everyone's attention to, the LIP document is obviously a large document, but I think we've done a really good job trying to take all of the vast amounts of feedback that we've received, distill it, and also within the LIP document, the appendices, share that information and feedback that we're getting as we work with our LIP committee. Next slide, please. So when we're talking about edits to the full draft, some of the specific things that we want to look at are, we added specific language to describe disproportionately impacted populations. We included data on rates of homelessness from Portland State University, the HRAC, and Department of Education. Described scope of scaling of existing and new programs, including, of course, important peer supports, resident services, community and behavioral health programs, and supportive housing. We also describe plans to invest in capacity building, culturally specific service provision, describe planned investments in partnerships with mental health and affordable housing programs, LOA N, for example, building operations and project-based vouchers. We also clarify our commitment to pay equity within the document and describe commitments to ongoing advisory structures. Next slide, please. One thing that we just wanted to call the attention to, because there has been a lot of work done by our staff, and really we have to give all the credit to our community who's invested so much time and energy into this. And it's just been a great commitment. So, advisory committee feedback that we want to share here, Nathan Teskey of Vienna Star. And that's just in general some really positive feedback that we got about the openness of the advisory committee and the way that we've been working with our LIP advisory committee and bringing back feedback. So we want to share that and put that up there for our board and for our community to see. And we'll continue that commitment to transparency in our process and really listening to our advisory committee. Next slide, please.
Thank you, Josh. I think this is where I take over. Can the board hear me? Okay, good afternoon, board. My name is Jess Larson. I'm new to your team in the Department of Housing Services, helping to lead up this important supportive housing services work, and happy to be here with you all. Josh, thank you for filling in Ali's great work with the LIP advisory work. That was great. covering all of our bases on the go here. So Josh has done a great job of reviewing where we are in this process to prepare this local implementation plan for its final phase and your final review on April 6th. And reviewing all of that process and the feedback we've received to date and how it's been, how that feedback has been added into that working draft you reviewed last time. And today I am here to bring you the new material in this full draft, which is primarily covered in the planned investment sections of the LIP full draft. So as we get started, this is a slide to just provide some background context information for how staff approached the investment planning part of our local implementation plan investment. So as you hopefully recall, we are planning for approximately $38 million in new funding for supportive housing services in year one. But simultaneously, we're also planning that our annual funding will be growing to approximately $75 million a year with this program. We expect it not to reach that full rate of collection until year 3. But as we're building out the program, we both have to plan for year 1 and sort of long-term growth and that annual investment level. Also, as we're preparing our investment planning, we need to think about the balance between priority populations A and B. Josh reviewed that slide with you about these priority populations that are called out specifically in the measure. Essentially, there's a commitment that 75% of our investments need to be made in addressing what is generally considered chronic homelessness, but it's a local, flexible definition of addressing people with prolonged homelessness or risk of prolonged homelessness and complex disabilities that need supportive housing to be successful. Those investments need to be balanced with other investments. 25% of our program investments must be made to address the needs of population B. So I will describe further in future slides how we plan to do this. And then just as we get started, I want to frame for you all the underlying or overarching goals of our program. As you know, the goal of the program is intentionally scaled to address chronic homelessness in the region and ideally achieve what is in the system sometimes called functional zero chronic homelessness. It's a rate of the occurrence of homelessness that we would achieve when our system has the capacity to be immediately responsive to anyone who might be chronically homeless. That is our goal, that we have a system of care, of housing, of case managers, of supports in place so that if anyone is disabled and at risk of prolonged homelessness, they are immediately helped along back into stable and secure and sustained housing. That is the fundamental goal of the program. And Washington County's role in achieving that is a goal of 1,665 supportive housing placements. That's all of those case managers and supports with that long-term rent assistance in housing that is tenant-based and project-based throughout our community in partnership with in partnership with Clackamas and Multnomah counties. So that is one overarching goal. And all of this is going to be done through that regional coordination and systems leveraging to achieve that complete system of care. That is also encompasses a network of culturally specific services. So I just wanted to start our investment planning sections that are new in the LIP with this grounding of context that helped inform and drive our recommendations for you in this section. Next slide, please. So we begin with that serving priority population A. And these next 4 slides I'm going to go through really are sort of areas of focused investment that are related to specific program goals and priority populations. So the programmatic goal on this slide is those supportive housing placements that we aim to achieve in serving priority population A specifically. So our goal in year 1 is quite ambitious. I want to be very clear with the board. This is an ambitious goal that we also believe is achievable. And the goal is to achieve 500 supportive housing placements in year one, because as you recall, we have about $38 million in year one. We're growing to about 75 million. And ultimately we need to be sustaining, our goal is to sustain 1,600 more than 1,600 supportive housing placements. So we need an ambitious goal in our first year because we need to get started towards that long-term operating goal. And so in order to provide the supportive housing, 500 supportive housing placements in year one, we'll be making investments both in housing services. Those are the costs to help someone get into housing, pay the move-in costs, the deposit, any back debt owed, for example. Other housing services include that long-term rent assistance voucher. That's the tool that buys down the rent to make sure it's affordable no matter what the household's income is. And then the landlord guarantee, which is a tool of partnering with the landlord to ensure that if there are any costs or damages incurred in partnering with us to provide this housing, that landlord will be reimbursed. So those are the housing services under that in serving population A with supportive housing. And then there are support services, the wraparound supports, if you will, those outreach workers and housing navigators to help people get to housing, the community health workers, behavioral health care, peer supports, resident services, education, employment, and other programs that are going to help people both achieve housing and stay in housing and generally support their wellness in our community. So this is an area of investment to address and reach a goal of creating 500 supportive housing placements in year one to serve population A, priority population A. And we expect that this will be about 59% of our programmatic investments and approximately $22.5 million. So I'm going to go through three more kind of similar areas of investment that define and describe our proposed planned investments for the board. Next slide, please. So this slide describes how we are going to target our investments to serve priority population B. And the goal here is to reach an additional 500 households that will be served with whatever it takes to achieve housing stability, even if they aren't meeting that higher level of permanent supports. But sometimes they may need those higher level of permanent support. So population B are, as a reminder, are households that aren't necessarily experiencing chronic homelessness. Usually it's an economic driven reason for homelessness, lost income or very low income. And so sometimes there is a combination of housing investments and services investments that are needed to help stabilize these households. Actually, it sounds very much the same as in population B. There's just some slight variation. For example, in serving population B, sometimes we don't just use long-term rent assistance. We might use a short-term rent assistance or a one-time housing intervention to stabilize that household. And oftentimes the wraparound services are time-based or a little more tailored and not as expansive and comprehensive for meeting those households, the stability needs of these households. And all of this will be in conjunction on top of our already existing continuum of care programs like rapid rehousing. So you're going to be seeing similar programmatic investments there. And as you will recall, the commitment is that there's proportionate distribution of serving both population A and population B. So here we are recommending 19% of the program invested to serve population B, and you'll see in later slides why that is. So approximately $7.5 million with these housing and services investments to create housing stability for population B. Next slide, please. So another major important investment of building out capacity through the new supportive housing services program is regarding our shelter capacity. We don't currently have capacity programs that fund year-round shelter in Washington County, and that limits our ability to help people experiencing homelessness get the supports they need to get on track to stable housing through supportive housing. So we want to make sure that we're expanding our current shelter network to include year-round capacity for individuals. We have year-round shelter capacity for families and youth, but we have none for individual adults. So we want to make sure that we are creating that ongoing investment. And this will serve both priority populations A and B. We expect that this will cost approximately $5 million to expand 100 year-round shelter beds, about 13% of the program. And we want to make sure that it's both the operations to support those shelters, but also those case managers and service navigators to help people get on their way through shelter to stable housing placements as soon as possible. Next slide, please. And speaking of system capacity, here we are speaking to the equitable system of care and the capacity building we want to make into ensuring not just that we have services, but that we have services that are equitable and fully supported. And we have a system that can function at this increased scale. And that's going to take a lot of upfront capacity building investments. We want to pay special attention to ensuring that all providers are delivering a culturally responsive standard of care to anyone who comes in for services, for housing or shelter, or whatever the care might be through supportive housing services. So that's going to require training the entire system of providers. Additionally, we want to make sure that we have a network of culturally specific organizations that are providing culturally specific services. And that's going to take investments in capacity building for those organizations, small and emerging programs and culturally specific organizations, to be able to be full partners in the delivery of services here in Washington County. So we want a full suite of services that are available. And we want to also make sure that we have culturally specific services available to serve our diverse community. And then last, there's just systems capacity that we need around system integration with the education or the community behavioral health and healthcare system at large, working with the correction system. Of obviously data expansion, but also data integration with those systems and with our county partners in Clackamas and Multnomah County. So there's a lot of systems systems capacity building that we'll be doing here. So our goal is to build out our network of culturally specific services and ensure a culturally responsive system of care, and ensure that our system of care has the capacity it needs to deliver the services and the outcomes we've promised to voters. And so we're proposing approximately $3 million of investment, or 8% of the program, for these purposes to serve both populations A and B. So the next few slides, I think, are kind of high level. Yes, you can proceed to the next slide, please. High level view, just pie chart views of what I've just described. So here's how that gets distributed to the different priority populations A and B. And of course, the gray section is the combining of populations A and B, because there's no way to separate out. Those investments will be serving both populations. And that's how we will achieve the 75-25 split that's required in the measure. The next slide looks at these investments a little bit differently. If you can proceed to the next slide, please. So this looks at the kinds of investments, the housing programs and the services, and then the capacity building investments. So you can see, just on balance, how we are trying to do all things with our investments at once. And then the next slide, just as a quick reminder, we discussed this last time, and this is spelled out in detail. These are the 6 kind of categories of investments. And the next slide shows us how we think those investments, more specifically, dialed in our investments, how they will be distributed. So much of this investment will come down to that regional long-term rent assistance tool that ensures that we're buying down the rent and making sure that a household can afford their rent month over month and achieve that permanent housing stability. But also, you see the yellow slice is the wraparound supports, and the dark blue slices, that outreach and navigation, all of the supports that help someone come into the system and get housing. And then the green slices, those intermediate housing interventions. So you can see the full suite of wraparound supports in addition to the housing investments. But we thought it was just maybe helpful to see a little bit more honed in on those specific investment areas. And then the next slide takes that data and puts it out perhaps over a series of 6 years of investments. And there are just a couple themes here that I want to highlight for you for your consideration and how we're thinking. We're planning for year one, but we're also planning ahead, of course. So some of these investments will be able to mainly be about the same year over year, and those are the lines that look flat. And then some of these investments need to grow quite steeply to scale up to achieve those goals. So for the outreach workers and the housing navigators, for example, will have to scale up quite quickly in year one, but their capacity might be able to be sustained because as they house people, they have capacity to work with new people. And so we won't need to continually scale up their capacity in housing navigators and outreach workers. We just have to scale up in year one and then sustain that capacity for the system over time. That's different, obviously, than long-term rent assistance, because once we house a household, we have to keep paying their monthly rent month over month. And we need to make way to serve more people the next year. And so that's why you see a steep incline with those, with the orange line for the regional long-term rent assistance investments. And then right in the middle, you see the gray line. We imagine we're going to build out shelter capacity for the first 3 years and steadily grow to have hopefully about 250 shelter beds year-round in all parts of our county, so someone can access emergency shelter quickly no matter where they are in our county, and then sustain those investments over time and maintain about 250 beds of year-round shelter capacity. So this is just a depiction of sort of some general themes of how we're planning ahead as we imagine these investments growing over time. And then the next slide, really just focusing in on how we are going to be able to be successful with these ambitious goals in year one. We already need to start planning for being able to achieve that 500 goal, especially 500 shelter supportive housing unit goal, especially in year one. So we're already thinking about the households are being served with the Kaiser Metro 300 program, and households who are being served with emergency rent assistance and COVID-19 programs. We can help the households who are being given these one-time resources, but actually need long-term resources. They won't have to move again. They get to stay in the new housing that these programs helped them secure, but we will be able to continue paying their rent long-term with the long-term vouchers available through supportive housing and provide that ongoing supportive wraparound services that they will need. So that's one way we can kind of leverage investments being made and be on track with our ambitious goal in year one. We also have the exciting projects to look forward to through the Aloha Inn and Econo Lodge that will be both creating temporary shelter in the case of Aloha Inn and permanent shelter capacity in the case of the Econo Lodge, but then transitioning in the case of Aloha Inn to permanent supportive housing. So this is a way, again, we can leverage capacity quickly to achieve these goals. We're also working with the affordable housing production pipeline made possible through the regional housing bond and other projects underway to figure out how to align the long-term rent assistance with what are called project-based contracts. That's where you tie the long-term rent assistance to a building and you can be insured unit capacity to serve the households you need. And you can also put the services on site and provide higher levels of care. And then, of course, we're working with our tri-county partners towards capacity building with culturally specific providers to hopefully make those investments quickly and regionally so we can really leverage those investments quickly in year one. And I think I just have one more slide, and this is what we have to look forward to because of all of these proposed investments. This is what we would aim to achieve in year one. Those 500 supportive housing placements, 500 additional households with housing stability, 100 year-round shelter beds, and the capacity building fully underway for our culturally specific network, and all of this done with measurable goals that are demonstrating outcomes in equity for our community. So that concludes my section of this presentation around our planned investments, and I'll turn it back over to Josh to close us out.
Thanks, Jess. Could we advance to the next slide, please? So just to ground the board in next steps. So again, the full draft of the public comment is out March 10th through the 24th, so that's exciting. March 18th, we have our next LIP advisory meeting. The final draft for board consideration coming on April 6th. Regional Oversight Committee on anticipated for April 26th. Next slide, please. So we come back. I mentioned we have a bonus question here, and I will ask Chair Harrington and board kind of how we want to go through these board policy questions. I think last time maybe we took them one at a time, but I'll ask you what your direction is on this. But we have the 4 questions, which are what questions does the board have, and the 3 questions that we brought up at the very beginning of the presentation. So I'll stop to see Chair Harrington and board how you'd like to go through these questions.
Well, I just want to make sure that each commissioner has the opportunity to have their question needs met, as well as address each of these. We don't actually have a set way to do it. So let's start to see what any questions, commissioners, you may have for the current release and the approach thus far. I think Commissioner Tree said thumbs up. She doesn't have any questions. That's great. Commissioner Rogers or Commissioner Fye, any particular questions you want to start with, or anything else on the questions here?
I have a. Can you guys hear me? Oh, okay. It looks like everybody. Okay, let me fix this. Josh, great presentation, and I am really excited and looking forward to our community getting, especially for people who are experiencing homelessness, getting some relief. I participated a discussion, I think, was it last week? Yeah, last week, over the weekend, I think, around climate change. And a lot of questions came up about, what is Washington County doing around mitigating climate change, and then more specific, a lot of questions about that, when we're going to have a plan and all that stuff. And then it became project or more focused on this project here, the LIP, and people were asking, there were some suggestions around, calling out in the plan around our approach or uplifting climate change mitigation measures or opportunities, or some ways we can mitigate that. And I haven't seen it. And the first phase, somebody said they suggested climate change ideas to infuse into the plan. And so I guess the question I have for the team is, how do we incorporate climate change language into the plan, in all, not only starting out with our executive summary, and then also the investments that we're making, sort of centering also, as well as racial justice, but also centering this climate change.
Thank you, Commissioner. That's insightful feedback for us to consider how to infuse the considerations of climate change into this work. Certainly, we know the extreme weather patterns that are increasing year over year, both by way of extreme winter events, extreme summer events, the fires. These events really have a even more harsh impact on people who don't have housing. So housing is the first, even more clearly needed in those moments of the smoke or the pandemic. So it helps us clarify what we're fighting for, and I think that that's a reminder that we can include the priority of housing for people experiencing homelessness, especially when considering climate change.
Yeah, and I think one of the things I mentioned was energy sufficient, efficient ways of just putting our requirements and not expecting the developers to do, but this is our values and this is how we're going to center in our plan. So that was, I thought my homework from that discussion was to take back to this feedback to you all, and then hopefully meet the demands from the community and really figure out how do we uplift that language in our plan. So thank you. That's the only question I had.
Thank you, Commissioner Fye. Commissioner Rogers, do you have any questions or feedback?
I don't think so. Kami, nice work, you and your team always. As you know, I'm one of your biggest fans. I've always thought you did terrific work, and this is very good. Any thoughts I have to do more with sustainability and whether this, as it goes on with the sure to come inflationary issues we're going to face with increased taxation and people looking at other areas to invest. It's just interesting whether, and you don't know and I don't know, but it's certainly a bold move on the part of the region. Certainly a good strategy. You guys have done a terrific job in implementing. I just have lots of theoretical questions in my mind as to how it all work over periods of time. But beyond that, on your questions, nothing, and good job.
Thank you.
Thank you, Commissioner Rogers. I just have 2 items. First, let me start with, I really appreciate the work that staff has put into the first draft and now this full draft. And I really continue to rely upon your great work to get us to that final draft for our consideration. Or am I using the right term? I should go back to the slide. The final draft, yes, for April 6th. And hearing you present this, despite all my efforts at reading to understand, it really does add further explanation and phraseology to help me internalize the valued extent of these investments and the mindfulness as you go through with the implementation. On slide 13, I had a question, and you don't have to go there per se. It's the equitable system of care, which really gets to the system alignment and capacity building, particularly with culturally specific organizations and the service level. And I was reflecting on how you've talked about the significant infusion of investment in year 1 and then growing that up to year 3. And reflecting on an aspect of our coronavirus relief funding that Commissioner Treese and I participated in was around childcare and helping more of our culturally specific childcare providers get licensed for the emergency level of care that was enabled and so forth. Really taught me how no matter what we do, there are always hurdles. And so I just want to make sure that as you hear of hurdles in working with our partners, do feel free to let us know how we can use our influence for additional training, whether it's through PCC training, right, or webinars or whatnot that can help those potential marketeers. How do we get more navigators, right, trained up in supportive ways? So I don't have any answers. I'm just sensitized to how challenging it is. So I just wanted to share that because I know that all members of the board, all 5 of us, are willing to roll up our sleeves and practice the art of the possible in order to ensure that we all as a community are successful in reaching these goals. Then the second point I wanted to make is with regard to moving forward. And I'm sorry, I haven't been able to remember this yet. I know you're working really hard to get a full, a final draft, right? You've got the full draft out for public comment through the 24th, which is just a week from this Wednesday. And then I know you're going to do a quick turnaround so that for our April 6th meeting, we have a final draft to consider for adoption. And it sounds like, I know I'm on the journey with you, just like my colleagues are. And none of us are expressing that we have needs for additional information. My question is, and I know that you have to do some work to take that full draft, get it to Metro staff for review and questions, and then get that to the oversight committee, right, for their meeting on April 26th. So it's no vacation between April 6th and April 26th. I know that already. So it's still full steam ahead through then. Given that context, how do you want to engage with our city partners, the mayors as well as their city councils? Because after all, you're running a program that will serve our community members in need all throughout Washington County, or the urban area of Washington County. When do you see that happening?
Take that question. I would say it is happening and it will need to continue happening. So there are a couple of ways in which we're working with our city partners. We convene a city staff meeting on a regular basis to keep the staff apprised of milestones and opportunities for coordinating. The work of siting shelters, for example. We very much need our city partners at the table with us helping make that work possible. And also, in addition to working on a staff level, our team is beginning to do a bit of a roadshow. We're visiting a series of city council meetings. I think it started last night, and tonight we are attending a Hillsborough City Council meeting, but we'll be going for the next 2 or 3 weeks or so to just bring a status update to city councils to make sure they're aware of what this program is, the path for preparing the local implementation plan, and preparations for really programmatic implementation to begin in the summer. And of course, we'll need to continue to do those series of updates and bringing, just being in full communication with city councils as we go through implementation. So this will be maybe our first round or a round that is appropriate at this point in the stage of preparation, but we plan to continually check in with them on a regular basis.
So I may have missed it in my email flood, and my colleagues may be totally in the know and up to speed. Can you make sure that we know what your, from the roadshow that you started already this week through, that we at least have some current and future visibility into meeting with our peer elected official partners throughout Washington County? Great.
And there's, Madam Chair, Commissioners, there's also city representatives on the advisory committee.
Yeah.
Yes, okay.
Yeah, like Tualatin Councilor Bridget Brooks for example. Yes, so there are some elected tie-ins. But when we're starting a new program, we can't communicate enough with our elected peers. So let us help you with that. That would be great. So I once again want to compliment you for a job well done. That includes you, Allie. I know we haven't been able to hear your voice, but I know that we've been receiving information about how you've really used some tremendous practices in the LIP advisory committee meetings, the small group discussions. You've replayed with them what you've heard from these meetings, and you've incorporated all their ideas into the drafts that you've made available. So it looks like, yes, you've taken care of all questions we've had. The full draft really does meet our needs. We're totally on board with the planned investments, and we really appreciate that you have ambitious goals that you also think are achievable. So job well done.
Thank you.
Thank you, commissioners.
Okay. So that will bring us to our last agenda item. We're a little bit early. I hope that's okay. Starting our executive session. Yeah, oh darn. So without further ado, commissioners, do we have a motion to go into executive session pursuant to ORS 192.660 sub 2 sub D, using a different Zoom link for our executive session?
So moved.
Do we have a second? Seconded by Commissioner Rogers. All those in favor, please vote by saying aye. Raise your hand. Any opposed? The motion carries unanimously 4-0. So we'll now go to a different Zoom link. See you soon.
I will see you over there in just a minute, commissioners.
Thank you.